Drop it. All right, welcome to the Young Turks. That's how you start a show, by looking down. All right, Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola, Koa Beck. All right, let me explain. First of all, Koa is former editor-in-chief at Jezebel, and you know that. And she's the author of a new book, White Feminism: From the Suffragettes to Influencers and Who They Leave Behind. Fascinating, but you also know that because obviously she was interviewed on the Damage Report. You all watched it. And you've already ordered this book, but in case you've made the mistake of not ordering the book, I would go ahead and address that mistake now. All right, so obviously an exciting show for you guys. If you're a longtime Young Turks viewer, you know I come in happy just because I'm generally happy in life, and then the rage will build throughout the show. Okay, but the first story, we'll get it started off nice and easy here, or nice and hard here. Because of you'll see the title we're calling the 8 Democratic senators that voted against us. All right, with that weird introduction, John Iadarola, take it away.
Okay, I think that's probably for the best. As we here at TYT have been pushing for, Bernie Sanders did try to get the minimum wage increase, the $15 an hour minimum wage increase, added as an amendment to the COVID aid package. And so there was a vote, and every one of the senators had to go on record. And so they did, and they voted 58 to 42 to block it from being added to the COVID aid bill, which, wait a second, 58? That's not how many Republicans there are. And of course, that means that a number of Democrats also voted against it. And here are those Democrats and one independent: Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, Angus King, Tom Carper, Chris Coons, Jon Tester, Jeanne Shaheen, and Maggie Hassan, all voting against adding the minimum wage increase to that bill. And look, I guess we expected that there would be some, but eight's quite a few actually. Cenk and Koa, more than I probably would have predicted would vote against it.
No, I'm not surprised by the number, and some thought that was a reason or excuse not to force a vote on this, because, well, then those 8 Democrats would be on the record, and the thinking there was that, well, then it'll make it harder for the $15 minimum wage to get passed because they all went on the record as being opposed to it, and it's going to make it harder to turn them around. No, I do not believe that that is the case at all. I'm thrilled that by the way, a huge part of this, no joke, no exaggeration, was the TYT audience demanding accountability, demanding it and getting it. Now, what we would have preferred is to actually have the bill passed, but we did get something very important accomplished here. Now we know who the 8 are. Okay, so now they're not hiding in the bushes anymore, because that's the game that Democrats always play. Oh, it wasn't Schumer, it was Pelosi. It wasn't Pelosi, it was Schumer. It was Biden, it wasn't Biden. It was the parliamentarian, but we're never gonna vote. We're never ever gonna vote, so you can't actually pin it on someone. Well, now we know who the 8 are. We know who to pin it on, and instantly we have a petition. Okay, so there they are, okay? Joe Manchin, unsurprisingly, Kristen Sinema, who turns out to be the worst of the worst, giving Joe Manchin a run for his money on most despicable Democratic senator and probably winning. Angus King, Tom Carper, Chris Coons, those 2 are relevant. They're from Delaware. That's basically Joe Biden saying, I never wanted the $15 minimum wage. Those are the 2 biggest allies that Joe Biden has in the Senate. That was Biden doing a Kristen Sinema-like dance as they vote no. Jon Tester, and we'll show you the Sinema stuff in a minute. Jon Tester, Jeanne Shaheen, Maggie Hassan. Hey, Maggie Hassan, you got an election in 2022. Good luck. Good luck raising money from it, because as you're about to see, I don't think a single progressive should ever volunteer for you, donate for you. Not a single dollar. You got your corporate friends, you got it. You just told us you got it. I'm just gonna rely on corporations. Have at it, Haas. Okay, and then and I don't think they should even be voted for. I got a petition on that. I'm curious what you guys think, because I know that's the controversial part. Oh, but what if a Republican wins? So they could vote the same way? Okay, and so the petition is tyt.com/petitions/the hateful 8. And yes, it's a play on the movie, okay, but It's also because of the cinema dance and the purse and the cake and rubbing our faces in it. And Manchin saying, I will kill all of COVID relief just to make sure you have lower wages, and profiting off of it. All the money that they all collectively make off of our lower wages. So if you're gonna hate on us, okay, then you're the hateful eight, and we're never gonna vote for you. We're never gonna give you a single dollar. Go kiss more corporate ass and see how that turns out for you. That's my take on it, Koa. I'm curious what your take on it is. I know we're going right into the story, and there's so much more that John's going to tell us about this. But obviously, saying not even voting for them for some will be a bridge too far. But what's your take on all of this?
I'm disappointed by it, but like you, I'm not surprised. I think this is what centrist politics often look like, especially when you're looking along, how people vote. I think, especially given that this bill was tried and presented, during COVID relief, I think is really pertinent. So we're talking about a very specific moment in a lot of people's consciousness with the economy and labor and all these, I consider them more so trend pieces than like labor pieces, but specifically about, how women are taking on so much labor with COVID and taking on, all this care work that they're not being compensated for, and then effectively having to, homeschool children in the event that they have any, and then, clean the entire kitchen and the dishwasher and do all the laundry and everything. But on top of that, just making sure ends are met and making sure that, people are food secure and that housing is sustained. I was reading late last year from the National Domestic Workers Alliance in the US that specifically since COVID has happened, you're talking about like cleaners specifically in this country, many of them who are mothers to small children who haven't been able to pay their mortgage or rent in 6 months because of lost work. And so in some ways, I think that has the capacity to overlap with like service industries and all these other places that clearly have, a more like standardized minimum wage as opposed to in some ways just like low income labor. But I think it's very revealing in terms of who, certain Democrats are often trying to play to when there are opportunities like this, because they are rare. Votes like this to at least like reconsider the minimum wage don't come along, all the time. So it's really disappointing, but not unexpected.
Yeah. Well, of the 8 that voted no, it's been like I've been doing research to try to figure out, since most of them haven't yet really explained it. This is American politics, so they won't have to explain why they voted in a way that went against the interests of their constituents, both objective and stated. But I've been doing research on each of them. The interesting thing is that almost all of them say that they're in support of raising the minimum wage. I found one article, it's from 2014. Maine senators won't back down on minimum wage bill. They're gonna fight to make it happen, even though the Republicans had voted against it, and they've both voted against it now. It's been 7 years. They're still voting against it. Maggie Hassan, she was asked by Manu Raju, he tweeted, she wouldn't answer when I asked her why she voted against an effort to raise wage to 15. Quote, I have long been supportive of increasing the minimum wage. I asked her what was wrong with this one, and her aide interjected and said she's late for a meeting. Now, he later added to that thread with a statement that her office had sent to him that just said how much she's in support of raising the wage and she looks forward to an opportunity to do it. That's an interesting tactic. Just say that you're for the thing that you just killed. Like I was like trying to come up with like an analogy, and I think it's like if somebody were to scream at me, "Why are you stabbing me?" and I were to say, "I'm just interested in you keeping all of your blood. I look forward to future opportunities to maintain the integrity of your arteries." That doesn't help you as you're bleeding out. And all of them, like so many of them have said it, have promised that they're in support of this, but now they had an opportunity and they're not so interested. But really fast, let me throw one extra fact out, Cenk, and maybe this will help to explain it. Ken Klippenstein was very helpful, the legendary Ken Klippenstein, for tweeting out the net worth of the 8 Democrats who voted it down. And what do you know? They're not like you or I at all. They're actually quite wealthy, except perhaps Kyrsten Sinema. We don't know for sure, but the others, especially Chris Coons, these are multimillionaires who are perfectly willing to vote down a minimum wage increase during this devastating pandemic.
Yeah, so first on that point, yesterday we showed you a story that our own TYT investigative unit broke about how Joe Manchin is invested in potentially several companies that have lower wages, one as low as $8.81 on average for all their workers. And that's because West Virginia's minimum wage is $8.75. So Manchin, being the generous guy that he is, paid a whole 6 cents more than the minimum wage in West Virginia. So now he'd have to pay $15 out of his own businesses. So funny enough, Joe Manchin decided I'd rather keep the money in my profits than pay my workers. So, look, lucky me, I'm a senator. So I get to vote on it and I'll kill it so that I can make more money. Although he apparently has plenty, you could see from that list. And this is among the reasons why we call him the Hateful Eight. So now on the Manu Raju point, I'm thrilled and I want to give him credit for the follow-up, because for 40 straight years in this country, corporate Democrats have said, we look forward to doing X, right? And then they'll vote against X, or they'll secretly kill X, or they'll never bring it up for a vote. And then reporters go, dutifully report this Democrat in favor of X, right? And this is a perfect example, and they're still doing it. Joe Biden is in favor of the $15 minimum wage. No, he isn't. He just had his vice president vote no on including it in reconciliation. He had his two biggest allies in the Senate vote no as a sign of, don't get me wrong, I, Joe Biden, from the state of Delaware, had my two top allies from the state of Delaware vote no, because I'm not actually in favor of it. I don't, like, the only way that it could be any clearer is if Joe Biden flew a plane over the Capitol with that, with the big banner that said, I hate $15 minimum wage, I'm lying, I never meant it, okay? So if any reporter writes that Joe Biden's in favor of $15 minimum wage, they have a hilarious view of facts. That's, in fact, alternative facts. And so, and now the quote that John read you is, but all of them are over the top. We're gonna see in the next story, the Kristen Sinema story. She has a quote from 2014. Unconscionable not to pay $15 minimum wage. Unconscionable. She just did the unconscionable. And every reporter in the past, now they're getting better. That's why I'm giving credit to the CNN reporter who did a great job. Every reporter would write, Democrats are awesome. They want the extra minimum wage. Kamala Harris wants a $15 minimum wage. She just voted against it, but okay, they don't even point that out. Parliamentarian, you don't work for Democrats. You don't work for Republicans. You don't work for politicians. If you're a reporter, do your job. It's called journalism. And the headline should be Democrats kill higher minimum wage, because the Republicans have no control. They couldn't have killed it if they wanted to. It was Democrats who chose to kill it. Just that's the reality. I wish to God it wasn't, but it is. And by the way, I want to read you YT Prenude just did a YouTube super chat in the middle of the show. And I wanted to share it with you because it's such a good point by our audience. He wrote, could pledging not to vote for them pressure the Democrats into throwing them under the bus and running candidates other than them in 2022? That's part of the reason to do the petition now. If you do it right before the election, well, it's pointless because it has no chance of success. Then at that point, it only helps Republicans, right? But right now, we're 2 years out from an election. We have 1,000 choices who could run for these Senate seats. They say, no, don't be ridiculous. The incumbent has to run. Why? That's not a rule. No, these incumbents don't. Do you know what percentage of Democratic voters want a $15 minimum wage? Not 14, not 12, $15 minimum wage. Not generally in favor. No, $15, 82%. Well, if you're against 82% of your voters, then you should not be the Democratic candidate. So don't ever vote for them. If they're not gonna do, look guys, this is the bare minimum. We're not talking about Medicare for all, Green New Deal. Those are great things and we wanna get to those. They're saying, no, we were all lying. We're not even gonna do the smallest progressive proposal. So take them at their word. They're liars and they're never gonna do anything that they told you. I mean, they're rubbing your face in it. Manu Raju asked them, well, didn't you just say this is your quote about how you want to increase it. She's like, oh yeah, I want to increase it. That's why I voted to make sure that we don't increase it. Go find some other suckers. TYT.com/petitions/the hateful eight. Never vote for them, never make the mistake of giving them $1.
Koa, any final thoughts before we move on?
I think those numbers that Clipstein tweeted out are pretty revealing, and I think they really speak for themselves. I don't think there's anything more to say after you've seen that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have one more thing for you to see, though. Some video that I think rightfully has been making the rounds online. While a number of Democratic senators voted against including the minimum wage increase, one decided to have a little bit of fun with it. And so here is Senator Kyrsten Sinema during the vote.
Ms. Sinema.
There's just so much there in that couple of seconds. Now, look, realistically, her no vote is basically exactly as bad as all of the other no votes. They all had the same effect of contributing to it not being included. But if what you're doing is telling, I think in her state, I think there's like close to 900,000 people working below that wage. That like, why are you having fun with it? Why are you doing like a parody of John McCain, who, as despicable as he generally was, when he did the thumbs down, it was to maintain the ACA at the very least. Why do that? Why do the little squad and have your bag as if you're just, oh God, I got to do this before I leave. I don't understand why doing the fun performative thing on this of all votes.
Yeah, so first, let's also point out that she brought chocolate cake in case we were unclear about the analogy. So she's the Marie Antoinette of the establishment. Let them have cake instead of higher wages. Well, we appreciate it, Senator Sinema. That's very, very clear. And John is exactly right in the word that he used. What you're seeing there is performative. Now you're thinking, well, who's she performing for? She claimed to be in favor of the $15 minimum wage before. Now she's making a giant showing of like, ha ha, I'm for lower wages and rubbing your face in it. But she's not like Marie Antoinette, because Marie Antoinette was genuinely clueless. Sinema knows the positions, earlier touted the other position, and knows that she's going to get a lot of attention for rubbing our faces in her not being a real Democrat. Well, and that's your answer. So this entire performance is virtue signaling, or perhaps the opposite of virtue signaling, for corporations. This is to raise her hand and say, I have no virtue, just like Joe Manchin, just like the other six, but I'm gonna do a whole big show and tell over it. And so this is what judges do if they're right wingers and they're trying to get on the Supreme Court. They will rule that corporations can literally kill you. Kavanaugh ruled that and Gorsuch ruled that. And corporations make note of that. And so the Chamber of Commerce looks at that through the Federalist Society in the case of the courts and goes, oh, these are vicious, anti-worker, pro-corporate people. Let's put them on the court. This is Sinema raising her hand going, I will do anything for corporate donors, anything at all. And I'll have fun doing it. So I'll be your huckleberry. And corporate donors notice that and go, oh, that's it, atta girl, okay? Move her up the list. So maybe we'll run her for president or something, because corporate donors ruled all of Washington. So that explains the mystery of why kick us when we're down, because she's signaling to corporations, I'm the worst of the worst, so make sure you back me for my higher ambitions.
I only have 2 points to add. One being that if we're working in Marie Antoinette analogies, I think it's important to note that there is not a clean opinion among historians as to whether Marie Antoinette actually said, let them eat cake. And I think the record should reflect that. She had a lot of very pronounced enemies, both in court and outside. And while she was an extremely privileged young woman who existed in court and was married off as effectively property in a political pawn, I don't agree that she was necessarily clueless, while she was definitely not a class conscious person, for sure. Having said that, with regards to the performance on the floor, I can't even put myself in that position. I would listen to, any sort of like statement she eventually gives after the fact. But I think mostly what that speaks to is just kind of like the insulation and entitlement that can often come from roles like this, and this belief that, even when you're being watched, you're not necessarily being watched in the way that other people are being watched. And so you have footage like that.
Well, I'm sure she will make some kind of statement. I will say that she tweeted earlier today saying that she understands the hard choices that people have had to make during this pandemic. Well, maybe this was a hard choice for her, I don't know. And so one of the things that's really confusing about this is, she's tweeted, like, first of all, her own political history, she presented herself not that many years ago as like a radical progressive or whatever, and that apparently is a long way away now. But just like, look at this tweet: a full-time minimum wage earner makes less than $16K a year. This one's a no-brainer. Tell Congress to raise the wage. That was 7 years ago. And now she's in a position to actually do it. But I mean, going back even further, journalist Ida Chavez, she re-upped this 2002 letter that Kristen Sinema published in the Arizona Republic that says, until the average American realizes that capitalism damages her livelihood while augmenting the livelihoods of the wealthy, the almighty dollar will continue to rule. It certainly is not ruling in our favor, which kind of gives me like vibes of Pete Buttigieg writing that thing about Bernie Sanders a billion years ago. And then, then once you're in power, it's slightly different, I guess. The one thing that I'll say that kind of loses me, and I only sort of kind of touch base with this on Twitter a little bit, is people who are like focusing on her bag, which we talked about it, and it's not a bag that lots of minimum wage people are gonna have, but it's not a $10,000 bag. Supposedly her bag's like $150. Every guy in that room is wearing a $900 to $3,000 suit, so I wouldn't want to focus too much on that. Like, a good silk tie is $85 and it's not practical in any way. So there's plenty that's obvious to focus on without focusing on her bag choice, I think.
Yeah, I actually disagree.
I wanted to address her the tweeted statement that went out with regard to, individually, I support this. I think especially coming off the research of doing this book, I think that her use of the individualized narrative to talk about what she would or would not support and decisions she's made in her own life when confronted, with these kinds of choices, or they're not even choices, but like these exact realities, I think is very telling when you're talking about implementing systemic changes, like everybody having a $15 minimum wage and what that would do in terms of redistribution or rebalancing, any sort of dynamics that are there. The fact that she's invoking a very personalized story to essentially eclipse that, I think is very telling, as opposed with regard to, her politics, but also like how she is conceiving of this potential systemic change and what should be implemented to effectively eclipse it. And that is like these very personal choices, these very personal anecdotes, which should be a huge red flag when there are decisions like this that are coming up.
Yeah, so I want to comment on what John said there. Also, what Koa said, I'm going to come back to that in a second. So no, I actually think the bag and everything that's part of that performance is relevant. Only because I think she intended it to be relevant. So the size of the bag is almost more important than the price of the bag. It's so if it was not part of a performance, I'd say get off her ass. Who cares what she's wearing or what bag she has? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? But she's with the curtsy, with the cake. She's obviously making a giant point. And the point is, change on the outs, and this Kristen Sinema 101, she's perfected this. Change on the outside, continuity on the inside. And she knows the media generally looks at the superficial. They're obsessed with the superficial. So the media will almost never criticize any of her votes because they'll say, well, that's not objective. People have lower wages, they have higher wages. I'm a reporter, I don't care at all. And so if you want to crush those, have the powerful crush the powerless, I'm neutral to that. So that's the ethos of journalism that I don't agree with, right? So-called journalism. But she knows that. So she goes, now let me give you something else to talk about. I'm hip, I'm young, I'm bold. Remember, because she was going for the radical thing. And to be fair to her, not immorally, but intellectually, she gets into Washington and she got there by pitching herself as a radical progressive. That's smart because the majority of voters are progressive, and Sinema knows that. Once she gets into power, she realizes, oh, no, it's the donors that make all the decisions and have all of the power. And if I want to remain as a senator and protect my incumbency, I have to serve corporations. And she correctly adapts. Now, this is removed from all morality, right? She adapts to the environment that she's in. And in that bubble too, here's the thing you might not know, but I have interactions with people inside that bubble. The bubble is super thick. And that bubble says progressives are irrelevant. They have no power at all. In fact, you will have more power if you kick a progressive on your way, just gratuitously. So Sinema is correctly assessing the situation and going, if I make a giant show out of being young and hip, they will tell all of their viewers and all of their readers, the media will, that I'm progressive. So that way I can get there, trick them into their votes. And then I'll tell the donors, look at my votes. I voted with you guys and against my voters every time, and I'll get their money. So in a sense, don't blame the player, blame the game, right? And that goes back to what Cole was saying about Marie Antoinette. At the end, it was not her power, it was the king's power, Louis XVI. And that in this case, you could argue it's Manchin, but I would argue it's Joe Biden. And I would go beyond Joe Biden and say, no, it's actually the donors that control Biden, Manchin, and Sinema. They're King Louis XVI. They're the ones rewarding Kristen Sinema for rubbing it in our face. And that's what she's reacting to.
I will add that I think that I don't mean this specifically to Sinema, but I think that progressive politics, quote unquote, however you're interpreting that across a spectrum of realities and issues, has in some ways been flattened into a brand. For politicians, for celebrities, for famous people of all ilks, for Instagram influencers. And so this ability, kind of like what was said earlier, that you can signal these, certain affiliations while clearly voting them down, in the same reality, or not extending any sort of legislative support or funding, or depending on what we're talking about abstractly. I think that an unfortunate development that's happened probably in the last 7-ish years, depending on which part of the country that you're looking at, and then what parts of our culture, is that some progressive tenets have become very trendy, and they're trendy in such a way that they're not substantiated with votes. It's more so about optics and how you appear, and then kind of like what was just being said about being able to signal to certain newsrooms that you represent these values. And I don't think it's isolated to politics, unfortunately. I think it's leaked out to a bunch of other industries as well, as branding has become very pertinent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm going to say one couple of last things about that, because that's such a great point by Koa. So it basically, Sinema is saying, I think the media is stupid and will help me. Okay. Because if I go with the trendy brand of progressive, and they never tell anyone that I'm not actually progressive, and and I act the right way, I'm trendy in both directions, and the media basically works for corporate Democrats and are dupes. So there's going to be no consequences, and my voters are never going to find out. And it's a tremendous insult to the media, who usually just sits there and takes it. And one of our members just wrote in. We do the show with you guys. I love being interactive with you guys. Jean Genet wrote in. It's all about publicity. Sinema, like the others, thrive on any attention. And so, Jean, you're right. She's clearly trying to get attention here. That's why I talked about the size of the bag. It's like when Matt Gaetz came in with that ridiculous suit, right? And looked like some sort of mafia capo, right? And so it was a way of saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. So why would she want to draw attention to this terrible vote? Because she thinks there are no downsides. She's drawing attention to her being a moderate, which the media rewards, and to corporate donors saying, I'll definitely do whatever you tell me to do. Which, by the way, again, let's just be clear. She's just being more ostentatious about it. Is true for 90% of politicians. And so the ones that made it clear here today, that's why we got the petition, tyt.com/petitions/the-hateful-8. That's the 8 Democrats that voted against the minimum wage increase and then rubbed it in our face and basically mocked us as Sinema did, and hence the title. Plus, it was a good movie.
Haven't seen it yet. Why don't we take our first break?
All right, let's do that. A lot more, both fun and rage when we return.
Shame, shame, shame.
Back during the break, that's when we read your comments on YouTube and Twitch and try to get as much as we can in. And I want to thank everybody who just joined: Rachel Marie, Arthur Knox, Robin McLean, Jessica Mai. Robin McLean also upgraded to premium. You hit the join button below, okay? We got a post game for you guys today. You're gonna love it, etc. But more importantly, guys, we do the show together. Look at the change that we've created. We would have never gotten to see who the 8 were if it wasn't for you guys. So we can't do this alone, and I love that we do it together. Okay, so Little Mac McGee wrote in, happy Friday all. Seems like we have a list of Dems who need to be primaried ASAP. Example of ASAP being used in a perfectly appropriate way, reference to the last old school. And if, by the way, if you remember, at the premium level on YouTube or tyt.com/join anywhere else, you would get that last episode of the old school anytime you want. All right, and Jim says, MSNBC is already starting the Bernie is a bad man stuff for getting those little people's hopes up. Now MSNBC is the worst. They're way worse than CNN. They rival Fox News. I think they surpass Fox News for how much they hate progressives. They're on a 24/7 warpath against progressives, nonstop propaganda. So why are they blaming Bernie for this vote? Because they're so mad that their corporate Democratic senator friends got exposed. So instead of holding them accountable and saying, oh, can you believe they voted for lower wages? MSNBC has turned around and said, can you believe that Bernie exposed them for voting for lower wages? Classic MSNBC. All right, John.
Okay, so accidentally at the end of the damage report this morning, I forgot to read the community garbage person of the week. And because more than 21,000 of you voted, here are the top 3. At 6% of the vote, number 3, you have got, let's see, Madison Cawthorn for being a sexual predator and compulsive liar, very good reasons. At number 2 this week, you have CPAC for trying to kick off the end times with a golden idol, that's 21% of the vote. And number 1 with 61% of the vote, your garbage person of the week, Greg Abbott, for putting Texans' lives at risk again and doing it so he'd look cool to Republicans. Thanks to everyone who voted.
Okay, we have a little bit more time. So first of all, I love how many people voted on that. Keep going, Dragon Squad. I'm just gonna read one from Twitch. Jaden Thorne says, the righteous anger of Cenk is coming. I'm here for it. back on the Young Turks. Cenk, John, and Koa with you guys today. John, you got more news for us?
I do. Let's jump right into it. The filibuster is standing between the Democrats, their voters, all the promises they made, and there's still enough Democrats who will not support overriding it to actually do that. But maybe steadily, slowly, some might be changing their minds. Today, Senator Tina Smith tweeted, "I've made up my mind. We need to move this country forward, and that's why I've decided to come out in support of eliminating the filibuster." She went on to say in a Facebook post, we're just gonna read a bit of it, but the entire thing is available. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and to be honest, I started out believing we should keep the filibuster. Without it, I reasoned, what would stop a conservative president in Congress from doing terrible damage to women's healthcare, voting rights, and civil rights? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the filibuster has long been the enemy of progress. In fact, it's been a highly effective tool to thwart the will of the voters. What the filibuster does is allow a minority of senators to just say no to any idea they don't like. They don't have to negotiate because they can stop anything." And that is, I think, so seemingly obviously true that I understand some Democrats who want to keep it just because then they don't have to ever vote on anything controversial. And they don't have to actually deliver for their promises in ways that might infuriate their donors. But there are two in particular, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, that say, no, it's a long-standing tradition. It leads to bipartisanship. It's just a part of our institution. And I just think that is, at best, an old-timey, myth-ridden misconception of what it ever was, but certainly what it is now. And it's good to see some people willing to admit that they have changed their mind.
Yeah, I agree with certain pieces of that statement in terms of how filibusters have been used versus, how maybe they were originally envisioned. But filibusters in general, I mean, I'm for revisiting any kind of filibuster reform, but as far as I know, I mean, this has been talked about for a while. I mean, maybe not as like publicly and directly as this, but if even just in the last 10, 15 years, like what filibusters have effectively thwarted in terms of like gun control legislation, through all of the many different platforms that were cited in that statement. I think that's accurate, and I think it's long overdue to be revisited in terms of how filibusters are actually used in political discourse versus how they were designed.
So, couple of things about this. Number one, I'm happy about the development. Great, we'll take it. Okay, and I love to give credit where credit is due, and if she votes the right way in time, it'll make a big difference. So I'm moving past her because mission accomplished on that, okay? Now let's talk about the filibuster in general. So number one, I told you on the show yesterday what I think the Democrats are gonna do. Half of HR 1 is almost a must pass for the Democratic Party. It encourages more voting, it's great policy. It's true, it's wonderful, it's progressive, it's pro-democratic, not Democratic Party, but democracy itself. Republicans can outvote us if they've got more access to voting as well. It doesn't discriminate, but generally when more people vote, Democrats tend to win. That's why Republicans are in a panic over it. So when Joe Biden says he's going to reach out to Republicans to tinker with it, that makes no sense at all. All the Republicans are 100% opposed to it. So, but Democrats need half of that bill. The other half is wonderful anti-corruption measures. And there's no way the Democratic Party is gonna pass them. No way. Most of the Democratic Party agrees completely with the Republican Party on the corruption part. They love the money in politics. They can't wait to work as lobbyists themselves. They're not gonna. So the trick they're gonna do is they're gonna say, "Oh, we got to negotiate with the Republicans and Joe Manchin, wink. So we're gonna take out all the anti-corruption measures and leave the voting rights part in." Now, don't get me wrong. Again, the voting rights part is great. Okay, I want them to pass that. But yes, it's also a Democratic trick. And then since they need to pass it in, there's no way they can pass it through reconciliation because it doesn't have anything to do with the budget. They're forced to kill the filibuster. So that way they go, okay, good. I got rid of the anti-corruption stuff I never believed in. We got past the $15 minimum wage, which we didn't want to do. This doesn't hurt corporations at all. So they've given us a green light to do it. And so we'll kill the filibuster and pass half of HR 1. Okay, so that is my best guess as to how they're gonna do it. But they're gonna drag out this melodrama so that it is nearly the last thing they do, so that they cannot pass any progressive priorities. And I'm telling you all this ahead of time. I'm laying out 2 years of what's going to happen ahead of time, okay? If progressives don't step in and somehow alter the timeline, okay? Which is definitely possible, but this is their plan. And so then that way, they'll have passed no progressive priorities, and then they'll lose the Senate, and the Republicans will be handed the gift of having no filibuster. So that, and why do I say that? Why do I make that prediction? These are all based in facts and history. Harry Reid killed a portion of the filibuster right before the Democrats lost their majority in the Senate. And I remember screaming on air, why didn't you do it earlier to confirm all the judges? Now that you can't confirm all those judges, you're doing it the last second when the Republicans are favored to win in the next election. Why the hell would you give them that gift? Because the point is to help the Republicans because they're more pro-corporations. Now look, you'll think that last part you might find to be conspiratorial, but the bottom line is it doesn't matter. They all work for corporations. That is what explains what otherwise seems inexplicable. Because I know I've gone on too long and I want Koa to jump in, but the bottom line is if you wanted to pass these bills, the ones that the Democratic Party said they were in favor of, the one that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ran on, all those policies, you would get rid of the filibuster immediately. You would not wait until it's too late to pass any of them. And my guess is that is exactly the plan of the Democratic Party.
My only piece to add there would be in thinking about certain pieces of what Cenk just said, and then just coming off of talking about cinema, is that I find a pattern that is very dangerous in like exactly these conversations that we're having is when corporations try and tell us our history or try and tell us like origin stories of rights or politics or history or marginalized people or anything, and that kind of like just how Cenk pointed out, like they have such deeply different interests, built by profit. And so they have to build, it's marketing. They just have to build like narratives with like a protagonist, that's very like, binary, good and bad. And then, that is sort of shepherded in an effort to like sell things or, lobbies or, campaigns or whatever. And so a general piece that I have found to be, helpful in like not just realms like this, but also like broadly in culture is just deciding very early in my life that corporations would not tell me history because they're always going to have like a vested interest in a certain narrative to be able to sell something.
Yeah. Cenk, you want to take our? Yeah, I think we probably need to take our second break. But when we come back, we do have some video of Charlotte Bennett, who's been talking about her experiences, unfortunate experiences with Governor Cuomo. So we'll have that after this.
All right, back during the break. First of all, I want to tell you about Common Room tonight. That's on twitch.tv/TYT. Again, if you've got Amazon Prime, it's free for you, but we get the revenue. So take Bezos's money and ironically spend it on progressives. So they're calling it hashtag Bezos bucks. I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying, okay? Anyways, and you don't need to be a member to watch any of these shows live on Twitch. But if you're a member, you can watch them anytime you want. So anyway, Common Rooms tonight at 9:00 Eastern. Look at this, we've got co-creator of The Daily Show, and it's not even Liz Winstead, who comes on the show all the time. It's Madeline Smithberg. We're filled with co-creators of The Daily Show. Writer Mark Ganek from the show Archer, how cool is that? Journalist Daniel Fried, and some other dude in a hat. Oh, right, that's Brett Ehrlich. Okay, so check that out. So now,
by the way, Cenk, randomly, I'm actually gonna be speaking to Liz Winstead again very soon. So yeah, we're always in contact with them.
Yeah. See, Jon Stewart was a great host, and Trevor Noah is good, but nobody remembers that actually the two creators of The Daily Show were women. So typical. So, anyways, now to your comments. REF writes in on YouTube Super Chat. These 8 are actually infiltrators. They are Republicans that claim, and he spells it in a funny way, that claim to Dems while holding Republican beliefs. Replace these people with Justice Dems. So. That's part of why I don't mind telling you to not vote for them. Number one, there's primaries, and they're gonna cry 2 years before a primary. Oh no, you'll help the Republican win. No, wait, who said you were gonna be the candidate? We don't agree to that at all. Second of all, they give this a bipartisan veneer. So if you're going to help corporations in the same exact way that Republicans are, you might as well be a Republican so that there's truth in advertising. And we know what we're dealing with, and you can't hide your Republican opinions in a Democratic veneer. And so that's why it's super important to out them. There's so many comments. Okay. We're out of time. I love you guys. All right, tyt.com/join. Your comments are so smart as usual. We'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, John, and Cora with you guys. So more important stories. John, forward.
Let's get into it.
Governor Cuomo said that he has never propositioned anybody. Do you believe that he was propositioning you?
Yes.
For what?
Sex.
That was Charlotte Bennett. Charlotte Bennett was formerly Governor Cuomo's executive assistant and a health policy advisor, which, considering other Governor Cuomo-related scandals in the news, is an amazing bit of political symmetry there. She did a sit-down interview with Norah O'Donnell. Now, we've known quite a bit about the accusations against Governor Cuomo, but there is always something powerful about seeing someone speak about their experiences, and so we want to show you a bit from that interview.
You think all this national attention may have emboldened him?
Absolutely. I think he felt like he was untouchable in a lot of ways.
Bennett says their professional relationship took a turn on May 15th when she alleges the governor started asking her about her love life and then became fixated, repeating over and over again her history as a sexual assault survivor.
So he goes, "You were raped. You were raped. You were raped and abused and assaulted."
Another key encounter happened on June 5th when Bennett says she was called into Cuomo's office to take dictation, and he told her to turn off the tape recorder.
And then he explains at that point that he is looking for a girlfriend. He's lonely, he's tired.
You've just finished dictation, And the governor is telling you he's lonely and looking for a relationship.
Yes. He asked if I had trouble enjoying being with someone because of my trauma.
This seems highly inappropriate.
Yeah. The governor asked me if I was sensitive to intimacy.
In his office?
Yes. During the workday.
You have been quoted as saying that he also asked you about if you'd ever been with an older man.
Yeah. He asked me if age difference mattered. He also explained that he was fine with anyone over 22.
And how old are you?
25.
Wow. So similar in some ways to some of the other allegations against him, but also going very hard into that, focusing on her past traumatic experiences while producing a new one. What are your thoughts?
I think that what is very revealing, at least, what we know so far about these allegations and the various women who have come forward with, very similar circumstances, is that, with the exception of one detail that I've read, this doesn't seem to be about violating touch. And I feel like certain spaces, specifically with like Me Too literacy and like understandings of, power dynamics and harassment and violation. I watched, especially when I was EIC at JES, this, I don't like this phrase, so I'm quoting, but like this Me Too moment. Sort of landing in this, hypersensitive terrain of like not touching, not hugging, not leaning, this very like thin protective measure by which, very powerful people, mostly powerful men, can like secure their positions and their money without like young women coming forward to say that, somebody leaned in too close to them. But I think that with Cuomo and what Bennet has shared about her experiences, this is very tactful in the sense that you're talking about taking down somebody's boundaries who is considerably less powerful than you, trying to gauge, where there are openings by which you can manipulate them in professional settings. And, more specifically, I think that there's a lot of like tact there. I think that a frustration that myself and a number of other journalists who I've worked with throughout my career have felt, specifically around news cycles of sexual harassment and assault and violation, is that in some ways, powerful organizations, powerful people, they're able to sort of adapt with the times in terms of the rhetoric they use. And then also, fun measures like NDAs that make sure that they can't like talk about anything that happened. And yet, the actual power dynamics at the core by which like your boss can call you in to do dictation and then ask you in this roundabout way to like potentially be his mistress. And if that's like appealing to you while you're sitting there with your work, the dynamics that are at the core of that have not necessarily changed. What I'm often hearing when there are cases like this is that we've built in a sort of like cultural framework by which you can skirt those same dynamics and perhaps, prey on a young woman or young man who, doesn't have as much power as you in an organization, and yet still be able to say that you didn't touch them, that you didn't break any rules, that you were just mentoring them, which we've heard Cuomo say in this case. And so I think that's really pertinent that when it comes to, Bennet and I think a few other women, we're not necessarily talking about violating touch. And I think that should really be top of mind for people as they're interpreting this story.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. First of all, Cuomo has not denied any of the specifics. So he has said a generic statement about, if he defended people with joking around, then he's sorry for that. But this is not joking around. It's in the most advantageous framing for Cuomo, which I don't agree with. It was flirting, right? And I know that a lot of guys out there, especially from the old school, are like, okay, he asked and it didn't work out, right? No, guys, you can't do that in a work environment. So it's one thing if you think you're flirting, although none of that sounded like flirting to me. I mean, asking her about her sexual assaults. Jesus Christ, what are you doing, right? And so, but you certainly cannot do it in an office context. And when you're the boss and he's making it so clear, I will have sex with anyone over the age of 22. Oh, how old are you? You're over 22. Golly gee, right? I mean, it's so obvious. And again, he hasn't denied it. And so, look, all of this is bad enough. It's all layered on top of one another, right? So one of them is that shocks me is the abruptness of it. To me, that signals arrogance. And what I'm worried about is it signals I'm worried how many times has he done this? What results has it produced? Because when you come into a person you barely know, and she just started working there. So I've read the whole story, we've covered it in the past. And you just come in with like, basically, I'm your boss. I just told you to turn off the tape. I barely know you. And do you want to, and I want to talk to you about sex. And are you willing to have sex with older men? Wow, like the people do that. That's unbelievable to me. And look, there's just every part of it is wrong. If you've got somebody working for you who's a sexual assault survivor, you don't bring that up in a way that is massively uncomfortable, right? If you've known each other for a long time and that person brings it up and wants to talk about it, you could do that in a respectful way, but this ain't it. And she didn't bring it up, you brought it up, and you brought it up in the context of sex, not in the context of abuse. It's just, I don't know, every part of it is really bad. Yeah.
Well, I think, Cenk, a good point that you bring up with this is when I hear these questions and what Bennett has recalled, to me, it sounds like he's trying to extract consent from her. Have you ever thought about sex with an older man? Have you ever thought about he's trying to, at least is what it sounds like to me, like make her an active participant in this predatory behavior. And to me, that signals a kind of awareness for what he's doing. He's not trying to be physically forceful with her, at least not in that instance that she's decided to share publicly. So I think, again, it's the power dynamic that is really grotesque here, in that clearly that's being sanitized, in that, he's calling her into his office and asking, but truthfully, if you're a junior woman and a powerful man calls you into his office and wills your consent for something, is it actually consensual? And I think that's an important takeaway from this story.
Yeah, and sometimes I explain it from the context of different groups, conservatives, older generations, etc., because there's different cultural contexts, and I want to be able to communicate to everyone, not just the progressives. So, guys, it's a lot of people react to this with what? Hey, we're not allowed to have an office romance. No, actually, you are allowed to have an office romance, but yet there are very understandable guidelines for it. Very, very understandable. You should be able to get that pretty easily, right? And so when, let's say, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski eventually got married, right? And they had some sort of relationship, and it was perfectly consensual, and they did it all the right way. So don't let people trick you into false analogies. Okay, that is not this. This is a very senior person who's the boss of everyone in the building with a very junior employee. They barely know each other, and he blunders into a sex conversation, which now there's 2 women who accuse him of that at the office, 1 at a wedding. The 3rd accuser does not work with him, but he put her hands on her face in a way that made her super uncomfortable. The first employee says that he did try to kiss her. So it's like Koa said, it feels like he's trying to figure out what his sense of the boundaries are and get right up to the edge of it. And so, and look, it's not cute. And that kind of playing with the boundaries like that isn't working. Your intent seems clear.
Yeah. Koa?
I was going to say, I think another good point coming off of what Cenk said is that if you are working in analogies, I mean, as far as I know, Mika and Joe are peers. I mean, they are both, household names and have immediate recognition. And so that seems to bring about, to me on the outside, like very different interpersonal dynamics than, again, a very junior employee being summoned into a boss's office. That is a very specific predatory dynamic versus a actual colleague who you collaborate with and who is a peer, at least as far as we can tell from the outside.
Yep. I think that's all the time we got, Cenk.
Oh, we're out of time. Okay. Kovac, A, you're awesome. B, the only thing, well, let me just frame it this way. The book was awesome. So everybody rush out, white feminism. I love the old school rush out, like you're actually gonna go to the store. Okay.
I mean, if you live in Texas, maybe you are.
Yeah. Rush out to the tab closest to you. Click on it, type in any bookstore, and go get white feminism. All right, Koa, thank you. John, thank you. Everybody check out Damage Report, but apparently you all already do. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break. We've got a lot more news for you guys, including, yes, more rage. And David Schuster joins us on the program. Fun for everybody. We'll be right back.
Can you name the representative of your district?
The representative of my district, oof.
I have no idea.
I actually don't know who the representative of my district is.
Do you know what the corporate tax rate is?
I think it's pretty high. I should know this.
Like maybe between 20, 25%. I don't know.
How many amendments are in the US Constitution?
Oh no.
This brings me back to grade school.
I should know this because I was a history major, but I do not remember.
I don't know that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I have no clue.
Nope.
I don't know the answer to that one.
You don't know? I didn't know. It's time to change that. We live in the best country in the world. We live in the most powerful country in the world. We love our American freedom, but only half of us take part in the political process. Only half of us vote. We don't fulfill our duties as US citizens to make this country a better place. It's time that we use our voices as a team, as a country, to become better. We will stand up. We will be empowered. We will stay educated and informed about politics every single day because it's our responsibility. And Politiscope just made it easy for you. So join me, join us, and let's be Americans.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for that to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse us and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources.
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It's not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com. All right, go ahead, drop it. All right, look at this power panel. Cenk Uygur, J.R. Jackson, David Schuster.
Hey. Who am I? What am I doing here? Good to be with you guys. JR, nice to meet you.
What's going on,
It's a
David?
pleasure.
David, it's great to have you on the show. Everybody's already knows you from Rebel headquarters. You know it. David's already super famous from that. So if you haven't seen him on Rebel HQ, one of our channels, check that out because he's killing it over there. And for this hour, you get two former MSNBC hosts that were driven out for being progressives for the price of one.
You more recently than me, Cenk, so I think you're the alumni president as we speak.
Okay, well, and then more after me, but it's almost like a pattern. Anyways, we got a lot of great stories, so let's get to it. JR, Lee, take it away.
Let's do it. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he's blaming undocumented immigrants for the spread of COVID in Texas, the potential spread of COVID in Texas. This is while also criticizing Joe Biden for calling his decisions to reopen and lift restrictions on COVID and mask mandates in the state, quote, Neanderthal thinking is what Biden said. So the governor took straight to Twitter, first of all, to do this. And he said, the Biden administration is recklessly releasing hundreds of illegal immigrants who have COVID into Texas communities. The Biden administration must immediately end this callous act that exposes Texans and Americans to COVID, because the Biden administration is releasing them specifically for the sake of spreading COVID, specifically in Texas, according to Governor Abbott. So he also followed up those comments and he went on CNBC to speak a little more about the both the undocumented immigrants and also the Neanderthal thinking line. Let's see what he has to say.
Well, first, of course, Joe, it's not the type of word that a president should be using, but candidly for him, he couldn't have used it on a worse day because the day he used that word, his administration has been releasing in South Texas immigrants who came across the border that they refused to test. It turned out there were more than 100 of them who had COVID. My point is this. The Biden administration has been releasing immigrants in South Texas that have been exposing Texans to COVID. Some of those people have been put on buses, taking that COVID to other states in the United States. The Biden administration must stop importing COVID into our country. That is a Neanderthal type approach to dealing with the COVID situation.
So it seems like it's a bit of deflecting the attention from maybe the bad attention he's getting for his decisions to reopen the state at a 100% level. I'm not sure if he was expecting that part, but as you can probably also say, from the Independent, they also said he also defended his decision by stating that coronavirus infections were at a quote 4-month lows, but the average has increased in the last week.
Texas recorded 7,822 new infections on the 3rd of March, according to the COVID Tracking Project, which was a 1.9% increase over the last 7 days. So as you also might be able to guess before you guys jump in here, every time that there's a relaxing in the rules, you just might get a few more cases because that's just the way normal things work when it comes to something like this kind of virus. So following this ease in restrictions, Texas coronavirus hospitalizations spiked from an average of 2,000 to nearly 11,000 from early June to late July. The state also saw between 3,000 and nearly 15,000 new COVID-19 cases each day, peaking on July 17th at nearly 14,916. As you can imagine, I think this is trying to go from the original thought of what's gonna happen with this decision to then, after potentially it does happen, Greg Abbott trying to make sure that the blame goes somewhere besides himself or anyone else that was a part of this decision. Maybe I'm off. You guys let me know.
Yeah, no, you're not remotely off. So first of all, I want to make a couple comments on Neanderthal situation before I turn to the racism. So let's note the irony that he started by saying, can you believe the president used a word like Neanderthal? And at the end of the interview, he called him a Neanderthal.
Exactly.
Okay, so just noting the irony. Second of all, speaking of irony, no one who supported Donald Trump is ever allowed to pretend to be offended by anything, period. So I'm done with that. Number three, if you guys don't like cancel culture, what happened to the Neanderthals, just so you know, and comparing someone to a Neanderthal might be saying that they're actually a good and decent and peaceful person, and species at least. We killed them all. We canceled the entire Neanderthal species, humans did, by murdering them. So just so you know. So you should actually, if you want to insult someone, maybe you call them a Homo sapien. Anyways, now I'm just getting you facts. That's my job. Now on to the bigotry part. Yeah, it's okay. More people are gonna die because I removed the mask mandate. And in fact, as JR showed you, they're already getting hospitalized as we speak because of my actions. Squirrel. Or in the case of Republicans, Latinos, okay? So immigrants and they're getting released. Well, hold up. They were in detention facilities in Texas where you guys bungled the care they were supposed to be under. So some of them got coronavirus. Well, that's kind of on you, right? And then when they're released because you're holding them against the law, that's also on you. You then say to everybody, now remember, don't wear a mask. Wait, how is that not on you? Right, so even if you were concerned about, oh my God, brown people are being released and 6% of them have coronavirus because of what I did to them. Hurry up and take your masks off. How does that make sense?
I have this theory, actually, that this goes farther back. And if you want to talk about Neanderthals, I mean, last I checked, Neanderthals, they didn't have electricity or power. So in that way, a lot of Texans perhaps are feeling what Neanderthals were thinking. And Greg Abbott, 60 people in Texas died because of the deregulation of the electricity and the power and because of the winter storm that came in and 4 million people who didn't have power for a week. So Greg Abbott, embarrassed, I suppose, about that and thinks, I know how I can change the subject. I can say, we're gonna open up the state 100%. Everybody take off your masks, do whatever you want. And joy, look at this. We are the free state, the Lone Star State. Texas is ahead of everybody else. And suddenly, instead of talking about the electricity crisis, which Republicans own, now it's, Greg Abbott deserves some credit for taking off the masks. And then he gets walloped for it. And he's thinking, now wait a second, what happens if more people die because now of COVID-19, what am I gonna do? Well, you say, well, the only reason we have COVID now is because it's the Biden administration has changed the immigration rules and is allowing more people in across the border. And therefore, the Biden administration is the boogeyman when this doesn't work out. And what Greg Abbott gets to do is, by the way, he wraps some of this into a kernel of truth. Yes, there are a few more people who are showing up at the border. And yes, COVID-19 cases are gonna go up in Texas. And what he's able to do is we're having this bizarre conversation about Neanderthals and presidential language instead of, is it wise to be opening the state of Texas? Shouldn't there be some aftermath in terms of what happened in Texas with the electricity and the power? And Greg Abbott gets to dismiss all of that. It's brilliant, but it's also evil and sickening.
That refocus of that kind of question is something that doesn't happen, or maybe he doesn't want to make sure anyone asks him, because then he'll have to actually confront that particular issue. And we've already seen it has to be some kind of an emotional connection, or to make sure, or emotional outrage, in order to make sure that his constituents or the people that voted for him are still on board for this maze that he's trying to send everyone through. So the Neanderthal thinking has become the new deplorables. It worked pretty well after Hillary Clinton said it during the election in 2016. And that galvanized all this support from people. How dare she call us deplorables? Can you believe it? Never heard of a term so bad as deplorables. Now Neanderthal thinking is the worst thing they've ever heard, because except this instance, as you guys have pointed out, after 4 years of Donald Trump, I'm not sure how they can go back and let everyone know, like, our feelings are hurt. I've never seen a politician speak like this. I don't understand why he's trying to tear us down and destroy us. Donald Trump said blue states can go away. And then if they go away, the coronavirus will be great in America. He said things like this. This is not just from Donald Trump. Bill O'Reilly, way back in the day, wanted the Quake Tower to get blown up in San Francisco. It doesn't matter. If there's libs there, if there's people that disagree with you, they can die and we'll be better off. Those things somehow just don't stick. Instead, we're discussing about deplorables. We're discussing Neanderthal thinking. We're talking about Mr. Potato Head instead of what's actually happening in the country. And that's the plan.
Yeah, so I love what you guys are saying. First of all, on the deplorable / Neanderthal point, at this moment, the number one campaign Republicans are on is this nonsense about cancel culture, right? At least the way they frame it is nonsense. And so one of the things that they want to be able to say is the N-word. So they're like, can you believe they're canceling us because we want to say the N-word? They called us a Neanderthal. Oh, is that the new N-word? Oh, get off of it. Which one is it? Do you want to be able to say terrible things? Or are you like deeply offended? Somebody hurt my feelings. Cancel Joe Biden. Come on, guys, get real. Nobody believes you. You're all frauds. It's the most obvious thing in the world. And then I love the point that Dave was making about layers of distractions, right? It's like a rabbit hole of distractions. Okay, people froze to death because I deregulated the energy industry and I took millions of dollars from the energy industry to do that. Okay, then he said Neanderthal. Okay, it's the immigrants. Okay, well, none of this worked. More people are dying. The mass. Okay, damn it, that didn't work either. I'm wearing women's panties, and a Muslim trans woman made me do it. Okay, it's just like there's no end to it. And this is a lesson they learned from Trump. A less bad distraction is better than the awful controversy you were in the middle of. So just distract them. It doesn't even matter that you're also going to get blamed for that. At least it's not as bad as the first thing we were talking about, where your decisions led to a lot of people dying because you profited off of it. Like he's like, well, at least when I'm killing people off of COVID, I'm not profiting off of it. Okay, and then one more here. To be fair to the political calculation of Greg Abbott, when people are outraged by him removing the mask mandate, that's largely sane people, not his base. His base is insane, so it is not a controversy that hurts him too much with his own voters. In fact, other Republican governors, including Jim Justice in Kentucky, are mad at Abbott for stealing the spotlight, for being the most brutal Republican governor, the one that is most ignorant and most opposed to science. He thinks, oh yeah, this was a political trick to try to get credit with Republican voters. I think his instincts are exactly right, because Republican voters are like, oh, you don't agree with science and you want to do something that kills more of us and everyone else? Oh, this guy's good. Maybe he should run for president.
Well, it's also he's planting the seeds, and I love that point. That I mean, you've got, and I think, look, you've got the point of Greg. Nobody who's in the right mind would actually think to blame immigrants for a rise in COVID-19, but by Governor Abbott being the first, he's planting the seeds so that when the numbers do start to go up, you can say, see, I was right. The numbers went up because of immigration, because of all these brown people who are crossing the border. And that way you can say, well, it has nothing to do with the fact that we're removing the mask. I warned you about these immigration people, and therefore it's Joe Biden's fault. Like it's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault that people froze to death. It's somebody else's fault that we have COVID. In this case, I suppose he wants to blame Joe Biden for COVID as well. It's gonna be Joe Biden's fault that the numbers go up in Texas. And because So Jen, to your point, there are the rather uneducated folks in Texas who support this. They'll believe it, whereas the rest of us, the rest of the rational, intelligent thinking people, even in Texas, are saying, who would even think to blame immigrants for COVID? And so it strikes us as surprising and shocking, but there's Governor Abbott saying, I told you so.
Yeah, last couple of clarifications here. First of all, I don't know why I got it stuck in my head. I said Jim Justice from Kentucky 2 days in a row here. He's from West Virginia. He used to be a Democrat. He flipped over to being a Republican. He's the richest guy in the state. He's perfectly corrupt and terrible politician. He just happens to be in West Virginia, not Kentucky. And then David, the point you just made.
The point I was making about Abbott planting the seeds with low educated, low information folks, because the smart people would never think to imagine that you would blame immigrants for COVID.
Yeah. And then secondly, for Abbott, he's like, remember when we blamed Chinese people for coronavirus? That worked pretty well, especially with our voters. They're like, oh, we get to blame someone that doesn't look like us. Yes, right? He's like, why don't we just pick a new ethnicity? It's not just the Chinese, it's also the Latinos. And the Republican voters go wild.
I'm waiting when it's black folks' turn.
Oh, it's coming. And that'll come. I mean, that feels like the direction that we're softening the field for that. We're making it rational and acceptable to blame right now the Latinos, the immigrants, whatever it is. It will come around because once you let this start, there are people who will take it to the next degree, who will lower it even further, who will debase the argument even further. So I just think it's a matter of time. Black people, Jews, it could be.
By the way, that also happens.
And that's happened. I mean, it's just, that's the direction that this particular party and the fringe in this party, that is the direction they have been going and are still going.
Yeah, they'll say that the Jews started coronavirus in the first. They've already done this. That's why I'm telling you. And they'll say the Jews like Dr. Fauci. I'm like, and Tom Hanks and Bill Gates, none of them are Jewish. What the hell are you guys talking about? Okay, but they're not. So
they could have started coronavirus because they were too busy with that space laser that Marjorie Taylor Greene said that was starting the California wildfires, that the Jewish whatever it was. I mean, there are people who believe this. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of them are in Congress. A lot of them are in Congress. Yeah. All right, we got to take a break here. We will be right back with more insane stories. During the break here, you get lots of great comments in our member section. As always, tyt.com/join. Two other ways to join. A Twitch, you can subscribe in 1,000 different ways, including they're gifting people each other subscriptions. I love that. I love the community. On YouTube, if you're watching there, you just hit the join button below. Easiest thing in the world, and it makes a big difference. So let's go to our members. Theater Goddess writes in, the immigrants that have COVID have been held in Texas for more than 2 weeks. Seems more like COVID was locally sourced and imported. So actually that's inarguable. So that's, and then we go to Cray Cray Souffle. If Abbott is offended by being called Neanderthal, just call him a knuckle dragger and move on. So we've got plenty where that came from. Don't worry, we can keep going on that. By the way, those conservatives, God, so when they're challenged on their stupidity, that's when they get most triggered. Like, oh, we get to call you guys names and stereotypes, etc., based on your skin color, your ethnicity, your background, your gender, etc. But if you call us names based on what we actually do, how dare you? Right? All right, English teacher 1984 says, will people listen? Biden said Neanderthal thinking, meaning thinking like someone who lives in a cave, who's clueless as to what goes on in the outside world. It was a great insult and you're all missing it. I like that an English teacher corrected us on that language. So that's why we do the show together. Thank you. Uncooperative Orange writes in, Biden wants to be a COVID hero. Pelosi wants her child tax credit. Nothing else can take center stage. Could be that disgusting. No, but Biden would get more credit if he also did $15 minimum wage as part of the corona relief bill, the COVID relief bill. Because guys, it's not just progressives that want $15 minimum wage or Democrats. 61% of the country, the whole country, including Republicans, say they want $15 minimum wage. So he would get more credit. That's not what it's about. He's not trying to get voters. He's trying to get donors. Okay, the mathematician writes about the Cuomo story that we covered in the last segment, writing, Cuomo clearly has preferences in a woman. As a sexual assault survivor, it's all too familiar. Cuomo stressing her sexual survivor history to her is predatory behavior. So it's a powerful story from someone who has experienced this. So again, that's why I like that we do this show together, because your experiences, whether it's something that damaging or just being an English teacher or just being from West Virginia and knowing that your governor is the awful Jim Justice, helps us do a better show. And Natasha B writes in, there is no can't when it comes to the US, there's only won't. Isn't it incredible that one of the richest, most innovative countries in the world treats its citizens with such disdain? That's exactly right. The Democrats say, oh, we can't pass the $15 minimum wage. You have the House, the Senate, and the White House. You can do anything you want. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk, JR, and David with you guys tonight. Somebody wrote about how great David is on Rebel HQ. Of course, so check
Susan
that out.
Klein, my mom in Indiana, thanks for watching us tonight on the show and writing in and impressing JR and Cenk. I appreciate it.
Well, there's some chance you got a couple of moms out here. Yeah. I don't know if that's an analogy or what that is, but anyway, I also want to read one last thing for you guys. Targum Unlimited wrote in 11 months, almost a whole year of true journalism, thanks TYT. So like sometimes I forget we've been on Twitch for 11 months. So thank you for reminding me. Twitch.tv/TYT. Tonight at 9 o'clock, check out Common Room. That's a show that's exclusive to Twitch. And you could watch it live for free. Everybody can. And then if you want to subscribe, you can get it anytime you want. And on Twitch has this one particular thing. It's free if you have Amazon Prime to subscribe to us. You do have to keep resubscribing every month, so that will take an extra 2 to 5 seconds of your life. But we do get the revenue. It helps a lot, and it is free to you. Okay, all right, JR, what's next?
Let's do it. So the proposed $15 minimum wage hike that's supposed to be that's looking to be in the COVID relief bill is not the only thing that centrist Democrats are opposing. They're also opposing pushing back against a federal unemployment benefits that was at $400 a week, and they're pushing that down to $300. So because of that, they're looking to make a deal within the caucus and Democrats. So the Hill reports that Senate Democrats are nearing an agreement within their caucuses to reduce the boost in federal unemployment benefits in the COVID-19 relief bill to $300 from the $400 included in the House bill that was just passed. So also the contours of the emerging deal call for keeping the weekly unemployment benefit at $300, but extending it to October 4th. To avoid the so-called August cliff. That's according to the Senate Democratic aide that was briefed on the matter. So there's this is just part of the negotiations that they're having within Democrats on whether or not what they're going to give these centrist Democrats that are against keeping the unemployment benefits, federal unemployment benefits at $400, and they're taking it down to $300. So they'll extend it first. Also, in a concession to liberals, the deal would also make up to $10,200 in unemployment compensation exempt from taxes. The tax breaks would apply to the benefits received in 2020. So just a little bit details on that aspect. Many people who received unemployment benefits during 2020 are finding out as they're filing taxes now that they either owe or that their returns aren't as high as they were expecting, and that's because they were taxed on those unemployment benefits. So this one concession to progressives is that they'll allow $10,200 worth of those taxes to not be taxed. I mean, of those benefits to not be taxed, so they can get a little bit back. And if you've already filed, apparently that will be allowed to be added on in some kind of way. We'll see how that works out. So also, more from the Hill. A number of centrist Democrats have been seen as worried about the cost of the legislation. This is the reasons why they're upset. And the jobless benefits have been a big part of contention for them. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell railed against Biden's proposed $400 per week unemployment benefit Friday morning. He was quoted as saying, "By one analysis, the Democrats' extra cash bonus for laid off workers who stay home will result in more than 60% of workers earning more money by staying home than they'd earned from returning to work," is what he said on the Senate floor. "This isn't state unemployment insurance. It's borrowing from our kids and grandkids to pay yet an additional cash bonus for not working and being lazy and hating Americans." Okay, so the last aspect of this is where the kicker, I think, comes in for me, because centrist Democrats are now agreeing with Mitch McConnell on this point. One more quote: "I was concerned about not making it so high that people wouldn't want to go back to work." That's what Senator Angus King of Maine said. He's an independent who also caucuses with Democrats. So he's concerned about how much people may be getting from unemployment benefits, and they may not want to go back to work because Americans don't like to work. I've said it so many times. I'm not sure how America can be the strongest in the world, yet the weakest, the richest, yet the poorest, and the most the citizens are the most strong, hardworking American people. But then at the same time, we're lazy and don't want to go to work, and all we're gonna do is sit around and take money and suck off of the government. It's a continuous process of building up Americans and then shooting Americans down when they're supposed to get the benefits that make us so great that we brag about to other countries. So anyways, I just had to get that part because it always frustrates me. So these are the deals that are being made. Is this a good compromise, you guys?
No, of course not. So first, on the politics of it, nobody punches themselves in the face better than a Democrat does. So you're going to do, the original plan was let's do COVID relief, and plus let's raise 32 million people's wages. It's both parts of the bill were incredibly popular with every brand of voter. And if Joe Biden wanted to do a bill that was based on unity, as he pledged in his campaign, this would have been perfect. It would have hit his campaign promises, the $2,000 checks, the minimum wage, just perfect. So the Democrats are like, well, how do we screw this up? Because we don't want to win. We want to look like idiots and then paint the Republicans as smart and strategic so that people will vote against us next time. So we'll have an argument over whether it's really $2,000 or not. We'll completely kill the $15 minimum wage, and we'll help the Republicans kill it, and it'll be very public the way that we do it. So everybody's not confused. It's the Democrats who killed the minimum wage. They weren't telling the truth the whole time. And now on top of that, we'll say, you know what? At the last second, we decided we're gonna try to give you even less benefits than we originally promised because you guys like this bill too much. So we're gonna try to ruin it. Now let's figure out why they're trying to ruin it and the possible reaction. I'm gonna save the possible reaction till later. But wait a minute, one of them said it was because it was costly, but later you find out when you read into it, it actually, the way that they're structuring it, because you don't have to pay taxes on your unemployment benefits, it actually might cost the government more, and it might be good for you guys. Overall, for the ones who do get it, you might come out a little bit ahead, although it doesn't look that way, and it depends on which bracket you're in. So it affects different people differently, but it costs more money for the government. So that thing you said about the deficit is just not true. So I don't know why you bothered to give a talking point like that, unless you think the media is miserable failures and won't notice the contradiction in what you said. Oh, never mind, I know why you said it. Okay, so and then the second part of it is you got to be thinking, wait, if it costs more, but it looks really bad, why are they doing it? I'll tell you why they're doing it. Because letting you not pay taxes on the unemployment benefits that you get does not hurt corporations at all. They're totally okay with that. But if the corporate world, in the form of the Chamber of Commerce, is telling those conservative Democrats and all the Republicans, we think our workers are lazy bums. The American workers are bums, and they're not coming back to work because you guys are paying them too much unemployment. Remember, the federal minimum wage is $7.25. We're out here crushing them. They're only getting $15,000 for a full year of work, no days off. So since our wages, we kept our wages so low, if you even give them a tiny sliver of money, it'll be more than what we're paying them. So make sure the unemployment benefits are low. That's what explains them trying to cut unemployment benefits, but adding to the deficit at the same time, because their corporate overlords told them, heal, get in line, okay? And then in terms of the lazy point, I just want to make a quick point on that. They keep saying people will not go back to work because if we pay them too much unemployment, ignoring the fact that they were all fired. It's not like they're like, you know what, 12 million people, we'll just walk off the job now. No, you fired them all. They're not lazy, they're fired. And that's why the media drives me crazy. They've repeated that talking point in 1 million articles so far, as if it has any kind of legitimacy. If you're a real reporter, you'd ask that politician, whether they're Republican or a Democrat, hey, wait, weren't all these people fired originally? So why are you impugning their motives and their intent with your talking point about how they might not go back to work?
You know, there's such a great point, Jack, and I sort of wonder if maybe the Republicans and even Manchin, they know better. They know that, and JR, to your point, I think people know that Americans are the most productive workers on the planet and that people do want to get back to work, but this is simply an excuse that the centrist Democrats and some of the Republicans have. And there are two things about Manchin of the last day that just strike me as so puzzling. First, just in terms of the logistics, let's just suppose, for argument's sake, okay, if we were to allow Manchin's way and the unemployment benefits have to be renewed in July, heading into the August cliff. Well, guess who's not working in July and August? That's right, Congress. So you actually increase the chances that this doesn't get done in the summertime and that you do have a lapse of unemployment benefits next summer. That's the benefit of having this go all the way to October. So for Manchin not to understand that is just sort of puzzling. The other thing is, Jen, to your point about sort of the media, I've been wondering, have any members of the media asked either Jen Psaki or anybody at the White House, what carrot and sticks have you played with Kyrsten Sinema, with Joe Manchin? Have you given Manchin any incentives and said, look, if you support the minimum wage, if you see things our way, unemployment benefits, this is what we will give West Virginia? Or conversely, has there been any conversation where Biden has said, look, Joe, you either come along with me or we're taking that military base out of your state, you're not gonna get the next round, I will make you pay in the way that LBJ made Democrats who crossed him. Has there been any conversation like that? Because it feels like Joe Manchin hasn't heard anything. He's not gotten any incentives to go along with Democrats. He's not gotten any fear. And as a result, for whatever sort of power reason, he actually realizes that he will do better as a small business owner if he doesn't have to raise the wages in the short term, even though in the long term it might benefit him, that he's just figuring, I'm the most powerful person in Washington, and now I'm gonna exercise my power not only by killing the minimum wage, I fooled them, now I'm not gonna really torpedo a $2 trillion package because of the minimum wage. Has anybody actually felt that he's really gonna do that? But he thinks, okay, they're afraid of me. So now he's gonna use his fear for his own ego, and he's gonna be like a wrecking ball for everything that the Democrats try to put forward that might actually be something they've campaigned on, that is aspirational for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I've got to jump in on a couple of those points because they're so good. So number one, in terms of the media asking questions, here's another simple one that I asked online today. Okay, so Joe Biden and his allies in the Senate helped to kill the minimum wage increase. They claim they're for it. Very simple question. So what is your plan for passing the $15 minimum wage? You say you're for it, but you aided and abetted killing it now. So if you're not completely lying, you would have a backup plan for passing it. What is it? If they ask Jen Psaki that, she's done. It's gonna be nothing but evasion. I mean, if we had real journalists, somebody would ask that question, and then the next person would follow up, and the next person would follow up, and they wouldn't let her off the hook. What's your plan for passing minimum wage? Oh, you don't have one because you never actually wanted to pass it. Okay. Now, in terms of, but there are some good journalists, no question. So Jeff Stein from the Washington Post asked an interesting question. He said, okay, if this is going to happen, will any of the progressives in the Senate do anything about it? And that's a tough question for Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and the others. And you know what the answer is. No, they won't do anything about it. That's why, as David points out, Manchin keeps bluffing because Biden won't do anything about it. Progressive senators won't do anything about it. The House won't do anything about it. So he's like, well, I guess I'm president. So I will dictate what is in every single bill because nobody's stopping me. And that is political reality. Now, we're not like the others. We will criticize our own because it isn't about personalities. It isn't about ego. It's about policy. So in fact, Van Jones just gave us credit on CNN for pressuring Bernie Sanders. That happened while we were live on the air here. And he's right, we did pressure Bernie Sanders. Any Democratic senator can block this bill. Manchin blocks it willy-nilly. I want this, I want that, otherwise I'm gonna vote no. Nobody ever calls his bluff. David's right, of course he's not gonna vote no. He's not gonna vote no on COVID relief. There is no voting no, it's a must-pass bill. If Bernie or Warren or the progressives in the House block it, all it does is it forces everyone back into renegotiating it, but this time we're at the table. But so far, if we're being honest, no one has mustered up the courage to say, no, Joe, you're not gonna get everything you want in the bill. If you're threatening to block it, I'll threaten to block it. And I call it the Manchin rule, and it's so easy. That's why it's so frustrating that none of the progressives in Congress will do it. If he votes no, I vote no. He votes yes, I vote yes. It's not on me, go ask Manchin. How easy is that? How easy is that? Oh, no, but the press is gonna blame me if I say, I know the press is gonna blame you, the press sucks. But look, at some point, you gotta gather up the courage to go, yeah, all right, I'll take that hit because it's the right thing to do. Otherwise, progressives aren't gonna have any power. Look at the corporate Democrats. Angus King, yeah, theoretically he's an independent, but as JR explained, he caucuses with the Democrats. Angus King's quote was almost identical to Mitch McConnell's quote. Same with Tom Carper, who again is one of Joe Biden's top allies in the Senate from the state of Delaware. You can't tell Tom Carper apart from Mitch McConnell, okay? So if you're a progressive, you cannot sit around protecting the feelings of Tom Carper. You've got to be honest, not just about Republicans, but about your own Democratic colleagues. They're the ones blocking any kind of real reform and real relief here. Yes, with their partners in the Republican Party. But you've got to clarify that if you don't do it, certainly the press isn't going to do it.
Yeah, whenever they piggyback on it and allow people like Mitch McConnell's point to live through Angus King's statements, it's also an indictment of the other aspect of this. There's the $15 minimum wage, and then there's also this with the unemployment, and where this has always been. Even before COVID, the discussions about unemployment benefits or any of this type of stuff is always that, hey, people are going to want to sit at home and keep collecting this, and so we can't give them more than $5, right? So if you put forward that someone on unemployment benefits, $300 a week or $400 a month, I'm sorry, $400 is going to give them so much more money than they would if they were working. That's an indictment on how much they're making when they're working. Goes right back to the $15 minimum wage problem. So if people can sit at home and make more money than they go and work full time, don't you think that's a problem with how much they're getting paid working full time? It's a circular fire against anything being progressed. We don't want to pay you anything more. We're not going to force businesses to pay you anymore. So therefore, even in a situation where it's a pandemic or just any other kind of layoff, and you're collecting unemployment benefits of your money, then you're going to make more than you would have been out there working. Well, maybe we shouldn't be making so little out there working, because then people are struggling, can't eat, can't survive, can't pay their bills. So again, that's another point that needs to be brought up. And also, they keep saying we should move things like the $15 minimum wage, all these things to a separate standalone bill. I'm waiting for that first question. Maybe it's been asked and I wasn't listening to the press conference. The first question then being, so you want that to go to a standalone bill? Are you going to vote for it there? Because the answer is still no, but they don't want to say that. It's just the way it works. Just keep pushing it to the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, one super last thing, guys. Look, the pressure works, whether it's put on by progressives in Congress or it's put on by you guys. So the reason Van Jones gave us credit, and now actually a good deal of folks in the media is because it's true. And it wasn't me, it wasn't JR or David, it was you guys. if you had not done the tweets to get it, the hashtag to trend, the media wouldn't have noticed it. If you hadn't signed the petition, over 10,000 of you signed the Don't Kill It Bernie petition, it would not have gotten noticed. And so you guys created the pressure. What was the result of that? We got the Democrats on the record. We now know who those 8 senators are that were killing the bill behind the scenes and not admitting it. You did that. That's amazing. So look, we didn't win today, but actions like that eventually lead to victories because these are the steps you need to take to actually pass the bill. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for participating in that. You guys did the videos where you pleaded with Bernie, please don't kill it. It totally worked. We need to do that on as many campaigns as we can. And today we launched the next one. So tyt.com/petitions/thehateful8. Okay, the way that Kristen Sinema rubbed it in our face as she voted no and sent cake in a Marie Antoinette moment, the way Manchin is constantly insulting us, all of them, right? And instantly it's over 1,000 people that signed. We just started it earlier in this show. So keep it going, let's put the pressure on. And what that says is, I'm not giving it any money, I'm not volunteering for it, and I'm not voting for any Democrat or Republican that votes against $15 minimum wage. It's the least they can do. And so if they don't do that, they don't deserve anything from us. All right, we got to take another break here, guys. More amazing stories when we come back. Young Turks. First of all, everybody go check out PureVPN if you need to protect your computer, which is not an if. You all need to protect your computer. This does it for you. So go to tyt.com/PureVPN, 7-day trial, so you can't go wrong. tyt.com/PureVPN. Okay, Witchy Woman writes in our member section, the Republicans won't get the Senate if we all go out to promote primary challengers. The mainstream media won't do it, we will have to. That means raising a ton of money to run ads nonstop in those states. Well, we showed you yesterday on the show the ad we're already running against Joe Manchin through Rebellion PAC. Okay, Rebellion PAC instantly has a killer ad against Joe Manchin. Go to rebellionpac.com and you click on videos and you'll see all the ads, and then click on join so you can actually give money for us to run that ad till the end of time against Joe Manchin, until he realizes that he's for the $15 minimum wage after all, because that's how hardball politics actually works. Now, let me go to more comments here. Eclectic Miscellanea says, I think it's time to stop calling them centrist Democrats. They're right-wing Democrats. The GOP is a far-right party and the Democrats are a right-wing party. What else should we call a party actively fighting against giving a higher wage and unemployment benefits to workers during a pandemic? So that is exactly right. It bothers me every time I see centrist or moderate Democrats. No, they're conservative Democrats, establishment Democrats and corporate Democrats. That's what they are. That's just more factual. Forbezilla writes in on YouTube Super Chat, I was furloughed for 3 to 4 months, making more money on unemployment. And I could not wait to go back to work. I started back as soon as they said I could. You know why? Because unemployment runs out. We're not dumb. We know, of course you gotta go back to work. Of course you do, right? And JR is 1,000,000,000% right. Look at how low the wages are. It's Hunger Games. Sage and Candle wrote in, my 75-plus-year-old father is a diehard Trumper. He finished chemo on Thursday, was diagnosed with COVID on Monday. Still in the hospital and calls it a hoax. I had a friend who got COVID who didn't believe, and then he texts me from the hospital, it's true, Cenk. And then he says, put on your mask. Of course! Anyway, he survived. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk, JR, and David with you. JR, go.
Ready to pull a little bit of hair out?
Yep.
Republicans in Congress are vehemently opposing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which would require police departments, police officers to have a little bit more accountability when they are policing. And so in the meantime, the Republican Senate in Kentucky specifically, they're passing a bill, or they're trying to pass a bill that would make it illegal to insult a cop during a protest. Let's find out some of these details. This is insane. Senate Bill 211 mandates up to 3 months imprisonment for a person who, quote, accosts, insults, taunts, or challenges a law enforcement officer with offensive or derisive words, or makes gestures or other physical contact that would have a direct tendency to provoke a violent response from the perspective of a reasonable and prudent person. That law officer. A person convicted of this misdemeanor charge could also face a $250 fine and disqualified from public assistance benefits for 3 months. I'm really not sure why public assistance benefits has anything to do with this. Continuing on, the bill has a provision pushing back on the defund the police movement, which states government entities that fund law enforcement agencies must, quote, maintain and improve their respective financial support to these cops. So the lead author of this bill in Kentucky is named by David Carroll, who's a former police officer. You might be surprised to find out. And he said this country was built on lawful protest, and it's something that we must maintain our citizens' right to do so. What this deals with are those who cross the line and commit criminal acts. Now, it wouldn't be a criminal act until you make it one with a bill like this, but cross the line, making it a criminal act. We already know a lot of what's in the George Floyd Policing Act, but first off, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, it's outrageous. It's probably the single most clear violation of the First Amendment I've ever seen. And Republicans have tried a lot of violations of the First Amendment, including saying that protesters can be locked up for protesting oil pipelines and maybe run over. So they've also tried that. But this is the government saying if you insult a government official, and yes, cops are government officials, you'll be arrested. Yeah, that's not what we do in America. That's the people who put this together obviously hate the US Constitution or have never read it and would rather live in an authoritarian government. And by the way, this could theoretically also apply to right-wing protesters. So Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, or even just normal right-wing protesters, if you disagree with the cops and quote unquote insult them, they could put you in jail. What was that, JR? 3 months? They're gonna take your freedom away for 3 months?
Well, no, it's $250 fine and 3 months of not getting government assistance.
Yeah, I believe there's a provision, I'm gonna double check here, that you might actually go to jail for insulting someone. Look, I used to joke around, but there's unfortunately some reality to it, that the biggest crime in America is insulting a police officer. Yeah. It's not on any law books, I would tell you, but you will get your skull cracked and you will go to prison. And they'll make up a charge on you. Yeah. Now, Kentucky's saying, you don't have to make up the charge. We'll just pass a wildly illegal and unconstitutional law so that we can actually arrest you for hurting my feelings.
And I'm sorry, real quick, David, before you jump in, because I know you have a lot. So also, it's baked in there. It's just from that language that would provoke a violent response from the perspective of a reasonable and prudent person. So this would include, after the cop gets mad that you said something disrespectful to him, he can attack you. Then after that, you're still getting the law on your coming down on your head for provoking him to do such a thing to you. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, look, no, I think to Jack's point about it being constitutional, I think anybody, if you said, if you gave them the outline of this, they would say, there's no way any of the courts are going to uphold this. This is going to get rejected. But given the way the court packing that we've seen over the last several years, and the way that some Trump judges in particular have started viewing the First Amendment, and the way the Supreme Court looks at this, I mean, I would like to think that even this Supreme Court would say this is complete nonsense. There's no way this is going to be upheld, but there are going to be some court fights and there may be some judges along the way. But here's the other thing. You said Kentucky. So maybe, I don't know, maybe they should focus a little more in Kentucky on, say, making sure that police, I don't know, go into the right apartment in Louisville, as opposed to worrying about whether somebody is telling a police officer you're number one when that person is about to crack you over the head with their baton. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, I want to clarify a couple of things here. Yes, the bill, I just double checked, mandates up to 3 months imprisonment for anyone who insults a cop, okay? I mean, this is absurd, but it's not just insults. They say insults or taunts. What's a taunt? I don't know what a taunt is, right? In that context, that gives you so much room to say he looked at me kind of funny. He didn't even say it, but he taunted me with his eyes. This is the most insane bill ever, or gestures or physical contact that would provoke a violent response, as JR said. Also, challenges a law enforcement officer with offensive or derisive words. Sounds like cancel culture. So if you say an offensive word, we will imprison you for 3 months. If you're a conservative, if you're not against this bill, don't ever, ever, ever talk about cancel culture. And by the way, don't also even walk near a cop, because if they think you're taunting them with your eyes, you're going to prison.
As long as you have a thin blue line flag, you can get away with it. Let's move on, shall we, really fast?
Okay, real quick.
The city of Stockton, California, they've had a 2-year experiment going on, a public policy experiment, where they gave certain members of the community in a group a $500 a month amount of money to see if it could benefit and help their lives. The results of this are in now. So from February 2019 to February of 2021, as part of a Hallmark initiative from former Stockton Mayor Michael Tubbs, 125 Stocktonians with a median income of $46,000 a year received a $500 per month. $500 per month through a prepaid debit card. This is additional income that they could spend however they wanted, no strings attached. Researchers found that compared to a control group, these Stockton residents who received regular payments experienced less volatility each month and were able to secure full-time employment, were better parents and partners, and even saw improvements in their health and overall well-being. In other words, the simple monthly stipend led to upward economic mobility. And there's a couple of instances throughout the article that talks about a guy that went from a part-time warehouse supervisor to become a full-time worker in his own field that he's working with. He's a better father, he's more relaxed, he's not taking the amount of medication he would have before for stress that just gets into your body. So anyway, it's allowed exactly what we're proposing people get if we force them into kind of work or run them dry. It also gives people opportunity to even apply for other jobs because they have a day off to do so. If you're working a part-time job for $7 an hour, you probably don't get much chance to go and apply for a better job the way they always say upward mobility will work. So this is kind of disproving that narrative. Let you guys go.
Yeah, so we had Stockton Mayor Michael Tubbs on the show when they were first launching this. So you guys got to see this like years before anyone else did. And I thought it was a really interesting experiment, and I wasn't sure about it, and I told him that. About universal basic income, and I'm super curious as to how it's gonna turn out. Unlike Republicans, we believe in facts, and the facts have come in, and it turns out worked out pretty well. So we should do more experiments to see what else can come of this.
And also, JR gets to a point you were making earlier, and that is, there's this perception, if we give people more money, they're gonna be lazier. No, that's not gonna change people. They're still gonna go out and look for work. If you give people a living wage, they're gonna spend almost all of it, in most cases, on food and groceries and basic necessities. 1%, I think, in the study spent 1% of the money on drugs and alcohol. I mean, I'll take that. I mean, that's great, and it shows that a basic universal income, a living wage, this is practical and it's helpful to people and it's helpful to communities.
Yeah, and so guys, that's why this stuff matters so much. I think we're out of time, right? Okay, I wanted to make another point, but there's not enough time. All right, members, we got a whole post game for you guys. So hit the join button below, tyt.com/join for everyone else. Thank you.
You know, old school's pitched to me from Jank. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? What are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong. I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? You know, what makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the you said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. And there's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
I heard of it. I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Kingsley.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies. And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. tyt.com join and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good.
John, come back.
Electric cars are awesome, but they aren't the best tool for every job. You can't park them on the edge of the sidewalk while you run into the store for a few things. On top of that, an electric car is just financially out of reach for many people. That's where Zoom electric scooters come in. When I say electric scooter, I'm talking about small motorcycles with space in front of you to put your feet. The Zoom scooter has a range of 60 miles, offers a smooth ride up to 40 miles per hour, and can be charged from any electrical outlet. Start saving on gas while reducing your carbon footprint. To find out more, go to tyt.com/Zoom. Enter the code TYT50 to get an additional discount.
I'm Brett. I would like to refer to this segment as the Do I Still Have This Talent show. So I want to see if I can play harmonica without my hands. I don't know why I have that. Nothing's gonna be more impressive than that. I can also spin a basketball on my finger. While drinking. I'm gonna spin a basketball on my finger while drinking apple juice. You can do this, dude. It's also flat. I don't know if that helps or hurts. And it seems to be somewhat wobbly. Ta-da! Nope, I don't know how to do this one. This one's a fail. Nope. Oh God, I'm so mad.
Our community faces a never-before-seen public health and economic crisis. Businesses are calling Levin Papantonio with their legal questions regarding COVID-19. You've asked and we've answered. If you're a business owner and have suffered financial loss or closure from COVID-19 and have questions regarding your insurance policy, call us for a free consultation. Some policies may provide coverage for lost profits and earnings. Stay safe, and together we'll get through this.
back on the Young Turks post game. Cenk, JR, and David Schuster's with us today. And we're talking to David about his experience at MSNBC because it's really interesting. And if you haven't heard it, it's enlightening. But we're gonna do that second. Something interesting happened while we were on air. And we're gonna do something unique here. So we never show you a clip without watching it first. But we were on the air and we hear it's good. So we're gonna show it to you and see what happens. Okay, so let me set it up. So we did a campaign to pressure everyone, including Bernie Sanders, but specifically Bernie Sanders, to introduce $15 minimum wage as part of the bill. He wound up introducing it as an amendment. The campaign that we did was #Don'tKillItBernie. And if he had not introduced it even as an amendment, they never would have even voted on it. So we think that it was a pretty good success because now we know the 8 Democratic senators who voted against it, and that is very helpful to us eventually winning on this. Apparently they talked about it on CNN, and we want to show you that clip and then react to it.
Look, you got to give Bernie Sanders a lot of credit. He has a progressive base, and the progressive base is a big part of this party. You know, you have the Young Turks and a bunch of other progressive forces saying, if we're not going to fight now, this is the one chance. This is a must-pass bill. You've got to pass it. This is the time to fight for our values. If we're not going to fight now, and if we're going to preemptively surrender, don't even take the vote. Why did we just kill ourselves in November and then in January to get the majority and to put that gavel in the hands of Democrats? So I think you can have sympathy for everybody in this thing, but Bernie Sanders, you know who he is, you know what he stands for. When he was given that gavel, you should expect him to use it for progressive causes, and he did. The big problem that I think we have is this is suicide for the Democratic Party to try to go into a midterm election, here in about 20 minutes. Not in danger of not delivering on stuff that people went out and voted for in terms of a big COVID relief bill, in terms of a minimum wage increase. And so, listen, we have a big party. It goes from Bernie to Manchin. Both of them have challenges, but Manchin is the one who has the opportunity to do a reasonable deal and get this thing done.
So I loved every part of that. And so Van is right about the surrender, and there are 3 components of that surrender. So in the beginning, it looked like we weren't even going to get a vote on it, in which case all the Democrats who were opposed to it would have gotten a chance to hide and pretend that they were in favor of the things that they promised on the campaign trail, when in reality they were not in favor of it. Well, now they're exposed, and that's why we have the next petition, tyt.com/petitions/thehateful8. Okay, so that's the 8 Democrats that voted with Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, and all the Republicans to kill an increase in minimum wage. So, but there's other layers to the surrender. If Kamala Harris had come in as the presiding chair of the Senate and said, no, this does go into it does go into the bill through reconciliation, which she had sole authority to do. Then a filibuster couldn't have ended this procedure, right? She chose not to do that. Instead, Schumer put in a presiding chair that said, oh yes, again, we agree with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans that this should not go through reconciliation. It should be much harder to do. Golly gee, I wonder why the Democrats want it to be harder, because they're not actually in favor of it. And then they take the vote and you find out, yeah, we were right. 8 of them agree with Republicans. And so, and then the last part of the surrender, guys, is the toughest one of all. The Democrats could still block this bill. It's, as we speak now, it's not over. They could, just 1 Democratic senator or just 6 Democratic congresspeople can say no. If Manchin's gonna say no, we say no. He says yes, we say yes. And I call it the Manchin rule, but obviously it applies to those 8 senators overall. It applies to Krista Sinema and her theatrics around voting no. It applies to all of them. If you guys want to use your power and say, no, we're voting no on this, okay, then we vote no. It's very simple. We said we were going to do the minimum wage. We're going to do the minimum wage. And if you're not going to do the minimum wage in a must-pass bill, you know you can't do it. You know it's going to get filibustered on its own. Don't pretend you're going to do it later. That's not remotely true. We're going to vote on it now. Unfortunately, we cannot find 1 senator or 6 congressmen to agree to do that. That's just reality.
You know, I got 2 points in the reaction. First of all, kudos to the Young Turks and to the entire community, because in a sense, it's not easy even for those of us who've been covering Congress for years to keep track of the arcane Senate rules and be able to try to understand and explain whether you need 60 or 50 or 51, whatever it is. But for people to be engaged and to realize that, yes, you do need, as Cenk was pointing out a while ago, you have to play hardball. That's what politics is all about. And there you have some of the Democrats and some of the progressives, despite where their hearts are, playing essentially beanbag. And there you have Joe Manchin and the Republicans playing hardball. And of course, Joe Manchin and the Republicans are going to win in that scenario. And so, again, there's nothing wrong if you've got a 50-50 deadlock Senate for being a progressive senator, for being a progressive member of the House and saying, okay, I'm going to stand up. And if this thing does not have a raise in the minimum wage, this thing is not getting through, and you can kiss the $1.9 trillion goodbye. Forget about it. Jen, credit to you and to everybody at the Young Turks for getting this point across. The other point, which I found very refreshing in seeing that Van Jones clip, is I don't consider Van Jones to be much of a progressive per se, but to have his voice to be able to articulate the progressive feeling and the split now that exists between progressives and the rest of the party, and the danger that exists to Democrats going into the 2022 midterms with this. I mean, that voice usually doesn't get represented on a mainstream media platform like CNN or certainly MSNBC. For Van Jones to be able to articulate it and say, here's the problem that we have, I thought was really very powerful in so many ways. And I just hope there are more folks over at CNN who are listening to that very point.
Yeah, no, you know, and always remember, it's not like he was doing this. I'm fine giving Van Jones credit for saying the right thing and pointing out the reality of the situation. But let's not forget, it's not because he champions this every time. It's not because that's where he always stands. It's because he was forced to. Just like when you force politicians to do certain things, the way that these petitions and these actions have forced them to even get as far as we've gotten. And that doesn't happen unless there's this grassroots organization, this grassroots level of people speaking out. Before you had online resources and online hosts and people actually get a chance to go and have a different source to learn about what's going on and actually talk about what's going on. And you can actually reach your politicians, your pundits. They have no reason to say any of this. They're still inside of a bubble talking about what they experience. They don't even hear about everyone else's lives until they go and campaign, roll up their sleeves and undo their ties and act like they're actually talking to people in the community. That's when they act like they're actually seeing people. During the time when you have to legislate before you get reelected, then you don't have to speak to many people until they go home for any kind of recess and say, I spoke to the people of Wisconsin and they told me they don't want anything. No. So now the people of Wisconsin can now directly say, hey, I'm from, I don't know, wherever, I'm from Milwaukee and this sucks. You know why this sucks? Because of A, B, C, and D. And you guys need to do something about it. And if enough people do that, they have to then go, I guess I gotta point out that I can't just call Bernie Sanders a crazy old man that just is disconnected from the American people. The American people are saying it to you. You'd have to ignore them before you could demonize one guy. Now you can't demonize an entire movement of people that are real life and are in your face and can put a camera in front of their own face to let you know how they feel and what they need.
Yeah, I'm going to defend Van Jones here, and not just because he gave us a shout out, but because number one, he's one of the few people who ever mentions progressive ideas on cable news. And number two, I know he took a lot of heat, but he did help behind the scenes to pass criminal justice reform in the Trump administration. I mean, look at how much trouble we're having past any progressive priorities in the Biden administration. So, and he took a lot of arrows for that. I actually think that took a lot of courage. And so, look, and we hold our own accountability here too. And part of that was not just pressuring Bernie, and it's not just on Bernie. Look, I did a video where I called out the progressives in Congress too, in the House. And it was not meant to be malicious, and I clarify that in the video over and over again, because it isn't personal, and I really, really like a lot of those folks. But they do have the power, and they're not using it. And it's my job to tell you the truth. That's the news. And I asked 1,000 times before I went on air. Like, there's nothing to ask, but I quadruple checked. Do they actually have the power? Of course, of course. 6 people if they vote in the other direction in the House can block the bill, right? Now, there are other consequences that flow from that. Then you've got to go and negotiate with those 8 Democratic senators. So there is some complexity to it, but we're all relatively sophisticated people. We actually had a strategy, and some of that strategy, as you can see with your own eyes, worked. And others other parts of that strategy are built to work. Look at the Kamala Harris part. We then moved on to step 2, and we tried to pressure Kamala Harris to go in and actually do her role as presiding chair and rule that it is within reconciliation. And guess what? A great journalist then asked her on the radio, hey, why aren't you overruling the parliamentarian if you want the $15 minimum wage? And then all of a sudden, she was under pressure. That's how it works. There's a strategy that can work, but it requires people in Congress to join in. My God, could you imagine if a whole bunch of Congress people or senators started saying, yeah, actually it is on Kamala Harris. She is the presiding chair. Again, that's a fact. There's no question about it, right? And then step 3 would be to pressure the Manchins and the Cinemas of the world. And there's a plan for that. And that also involves a lot of people working together, all the way from our audience to people who are elected. But in order to do any of that, you've got to actually take action. So I was told by some, definitely not all, that yeah, what I was going to do would be offensive, but accurate. It is, everything I'm telling you is true and indisputable. But they say, well, would it have offended some people? Well, then I offended people.
Who would it offend, Jake? Who would it offend?
It would offend the legislators that are not taking action.
Yep, it would offend rich people that have access to power and money, and then actually say what we believe. But in the meantime, where's the question of, hey, you guys are offending a large majority of the American people? They have no problem offending a large majority of American people. In fact, if they get offended, we're supposed to be concerned about how offended they are while they sit up in their palatial areas and just chill out. But people who can't eat and survive and pay their mortgages, even their rent, those folks, offending them, who cares? Offense? You don't get to have any offense to any of this. And that's the difference we have.
I have a question for both JR and Jake here, both of you in this, and that is, Jake, I loved it when you did the Burning Bridge video and you talked about how, look, I think progressives, their heart's in the right place, but here's the power that they have and they're not using. Do you think it's possible, and this doesn't excuse progressives and progressive members of Congress, but do you think that perhaps they were suckered to a certain extent by Joe Biden, an extent that when you hear Joe Biden during the campaign speak so emphatically at the debates about $15 minimum wage, if you would have asked anybody back then, okay, if Joe Biden is president and he gets in an office and he's got a COVID relief package, of course he's going to include a $15 minimum wage. A few weeks ago, when he started to say, well, no, maybe we won't, I was shocked, I was surprised. And then suddenly you have progressives and everybody who supports raising the minimum wage are behind the 8 ball. I mean, is it fair to say that some of this belongs with Joe Biden and perhaps pulling the wool over so many of our eyes?
Yeah, David, that's such a great point, and I'm really glad you brought it up. So first of all, if you're not in Washington, you cannot understand how thick that bubble is. The minute you enter the Washington bubble, the gaslighting is through the roof. I know for a fact that there are some heroes inside Congress who actually do want to block the bill, but they're being gaslit 24/7. Oh, you're going to be the bad person. It's your fault. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Of course, Biden and Pelosi and Schumer want it. They keep saying they want it. Of course, we don't ask for a plan. We have a plan, and it's above your head, right? And these things happen. I know for a fact that they happen. Okay, and they're happening now. Part of what I'm trying to do is not call out people like, ha, I got you. No, that's the exact opposite of what I'm trying to empower them. No, all of us on the outside know that you are right and the people gaslighting you are wrong. So if you're a progressive legislator, yes, the media will yell at you. I never tell pretty little stories about, everybody's gonna throw roses at your feet. No, the media will rise in their rage against you. How dare you? They'll ignore that Manchin's been threatening to block the bill for months now, and they'll blame it all on 6 legislators in the House that say, no, if Manchin and the others are saying no, we're saying no. And they'll pretend it's their problem. I know that. Will everybody in leadership in the Democratic Party rain down hell on anyone who blocks this bill? Yes, because you're ruining their plan to pretend to be in favor of the minimum wage, but secretly kill it. They're not your friends. The people on the outside are your friends, your actual colleagues, your constituents, your voters. And by the way, they do one other trick. They've weaponized their constituents against them. So they say, oh, you're threatening COVID relief to your constituents. That's a veiled threat. I'm going to tell the press that you're the one, that it's your fault and you should lose your next election because you delayed this bill. No, look, what happened? I thought the House was in favor of minimum wage. They passed a bill that said they were in favor of minimum wage. Now, when a single person inside Congress says, maybe we should insist on that, they go, how dare you?
Yeah.
No, we gotta empower those heroes, those quiet heroes on the inside to be able to win those fights so that we can actually get a seat at the table and insist on our priorities and not have the conservative corporate Democrats write every single bill.
Yeah, my only thought really fast, because I want to hear about David Schuster and MSNBC, but it's a simple one line. Since we love little snazzy one-liners in politics, trust but verify. Since we love to quote Ronald Reagan, and he's this amazing godlike figure. Trust but verify. Fine, President Biden. In the meantime, candidate Biden, you got a lot to say. Great, we're behind you. Let's go ahead and keep track and make sure you do that. That's all there is to it. And if anyone who believed it to a point, fine, I'm okay with that. But the reality is showing us that next time we're not gonna get fooled anymore to think that it's just gonna automatically happen. Now we have to push you to do it, fine, okay, push it. And my one more last thought is, I hate whenever Republican talking points will come to a point where they ring true and then Democrats can't say it's a reality. So my point being, a lot of times they'll always say, Democrats always like to say these things to their constituents and they don't do any of that for them anyway because they actually dislike them. Now, whenever that's true, which is sometimes in this kind of case, the reason they say it is because then that means, therefore come to the Republican Party. But in reality, they're openly saying they want nothing to do with any kind of help for you or any kind of representation for what you actually need or want. That's the difference is now you have a different outlet. You have a group of progressives that you can glom onto and know that they're really saying what the American people really need and want. So the whole argument about Democrats not always doing the right thing for their people is true, but people a lot of times don't. Democrats a lot of times don't want to admit that because then it gives some kind of a talking point to Republicans who are in many cases worse. But in this case, you need another option in order to have an off-ramp from that insanity.
Yeah, one last quick thing. Look, I also know that some folks in Congress watched the Young Turks and they saw us say that the corporate Democrats were never going to include $15 minimum wage in the bill. Then they heard the Democratic leadership swear up and down that they were going to include it. And then they saw who was right. And then that led to them beginning to think maybe these guys aren't on the level, right? Democratic leadership. Because how did the Young Turks know before anybody else knew? And it's not because we had secret information. It's because, like I always tell you guys, politics is actually not that complicated. Just show me where the money is and I'll show you exactly how they're gonna vote. Chamber of Commerce said they don't want an increase in the minimum wage. That's it, it's over. Joe Biden is not going to go against the Chamber of Commerce. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are not gonna go against the Chamber of Commerce. To this day, if you poll Congress, the House, probably 432 out of 435 congressional members would say Nancy Pelosi wants the $15 minimum wage because the bubble is that thick. That's not remotely true. She just knew that Schumer was gonna kill it for her. So that's why she said yes. Don't believe the hype. I guarantee you, if Schumer could have passed it in the Senate, Pelosi would have said no. We covered this shell game for 20 years. If there were a lot more journalists in the country, everybody could see the shell game with their own eyes. They've done it dozens of times. They always vote with their donors, not at all complicated. Okay, we're now short on time, but David, we're not going to be able to do justice to the story. But I did tease it. Well, and I do want them to hear at least the beginning of it.
Here's the short version. Sure, the short version is if people Google this, they say, "Oh, David Schuster did a show at CNN, a pilot at CNN, and therefore MSNBC was mad and they got rid of him." Well, actually, what happened is that we had a contract dispute. I had been verbally promised one thing. They reneged on that. And Cenk, you're familiar with how the MSNBC management would often say one thing and then they wouldn't deliver the paper. And so I said, "Okay, well, I've got a year in my contract. If you're not going to honor what you promised, then maybe I should look and see what else is out there." And they said, "Go ahead." So I started looking around and I told my bosses and the head of MSNBC, "Hey, I got an opportunity to talk to CNN. Is this okay?" "Sure, go ahead, find out what they'll do for you." Then it's like, "Hey, I think they want to, test me out on something. Is this okay?" "Sure, go for it." All right, so I do that. I shoot a pilot. A couple months pass. They just said, CNN's not going to be interested. Whatever, that's fine. But then there's an article in the New York Times about Jonathan Klein, the head of CNN. He doesn't have any fresh ideas. This is 2010. CNN's ratings are terrible. And so somebody at CNN leaks out, we have some ideas. We just shot a pilot with David Schuster and Michelle Martin. And so suddenly MSNBC freaks out because you shot a pilot with CNN? Yeah. Remember several months ago when you encouraged me to go ahead and look at what I might get from them? And so, well, we can't, you're not allowed to shoot a pilot. Well, you let me do it. And so my boss, Phil Griffin, says, but Jeff Zucker's telling me I need to, that this is bad. And I'm like, well, Phil, why don't you tell Jeff Zucker what you told me and say, yeah, go ahead and do it and find out. Well, Phil's like, I can't do that. Okay, so they pay me out and get a boatload of money to sort of go away and stop bothering MSNBC. Now, to be fair, I had some issues with MSNBC in the past. I had said things that management didn't like, or that I had called Joe Lieberman a hypocrite. He was in charge of Hypocrisy Watch. I had said certain things about Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton trying to twist the votes of superdelegates in 2008. I used a colloquial word that management thought I was literally calling Chelsea Clinton. Well, we don't even get into this, but anyway. So I think they saw me as somebody who I'm very big on. Look, I report like hell. I'm not gonna let the facts get in my way. If management doesn't like the reporting, so be it. And I think they thought that they really couldn't control me. And so when they saw an opportunity, once I was essentially suckered into, go ahead, do this audition with CNN, and then suddenly it's like, aha, now we have a way to get rid of you. So
yeah. So David, I never thought it was about the actual contract dispute. Okay. Right. And the reason I didn't think that is because I had seen already, and that you came before I did at MSNBC, and that happened before I had my issues with them, and before Ed Schultz did and Dylan Ratigan did, but after Phil Donahue and Ashley Banfield did, and you begin to see a pattern, right? And so again, it's not that complicated. The pattern's pretty unmistakable. And then when I was inside MSNBC, I would get notes all the time. Remember who the home team is, right? Meaning do not criticize the Democratic Party. And then there was this big speech by Phil Griffin, which I've told many times about how you got to act like an insider. And so it was just very, very brazen in my case. So when I saw that happening, I realized that they were using it as an excuse. And so let me back up what you're saying, because that's why I wanted the audience to hear it, because the inside baseball of it is, to me, super interesting. So you can see like the dynamics of the game that they're playing, because we're pulling the curtain back a little bit. So when I was considering not taking their offer to be a weekend host, I forget the timing of it, but at some point, an article appeared on Mediaite saying that I had bad ratings in January.
Yeah.
Now that's very curious because we were in June. So what that is a leak, and it's a leak from management to attacking one of their own hosts, a host that they had just offered, to be fair to them, a lucrative contract to. But they got the sense, this guy might not take what we're offering, and we told him to shut up about being a progressive and not criticize Democrats. And he's, in their minds, he's a bit of a loose cannon. He tells the truth sometimes. So they're like, whoa. So they start leaking January ratings. And look, the press is what they are, and Mediaite's written a lot of positive things about us, and actually has been one of the most fair outlets. But in that case, you get a scoop, they run the scoop. So MSNBC is concerned about Cenk's ratings. And I'm like, what are they talking? Because at the time in June, I had the highest ratings they've ever had at 6 o'clock. I'm like, are they concerned I didn't double them? What's the concern over? And I read it, I'm like, January, got you.
Yeah, no, and I mean the number of times, and JR, the number of times that MSNBC management would deliberately put stuff out there in the industry press to undermine their own talent or to put their own talent in place. It was shocking and remarkable and infuriating to me. I was just sort of this, square kid from the Midwest who believed in sort of integrity and had, I suppose, stars in my eyes when I got into journalism, and then to realize that behind the scenes, behind the curtain, as Jen points out, there's so much devious stuff that goes on. There's so much gamesmanship and egos and a lack of integrity and a lack of basic decency too. I think that was perhaps the biggest disappointment that I had in my career at cable news was this constant theme that a lot of these corporate-owned organizations, it wasn't about informing your viewers, making them better enlightened about their community, about their world. It was about, well, how are we going to get ratings? How are we going to play to that lane and protect our advertisers and say the sort of things so that we can get the access to the senators and to the president for the big Sunday interview? And that's not why I got into journalism. So it's, I suppose it was destined. I was destined to be a goner from cable news at a certain point.
My one quick question to both of you guys, since you guys experienced similar things, is there such thing as that changing? What about that could change? What could change from a cable news network that is owned by a huge corporation because they need the access? But you're talking about the access and all those points are something that's important to them. Also, it's ratings because obviously there's more money. So why is that so low on the totem pole, and how can that be switched to make ratings and truth be the number one and two things?
I'll go first real quick, Jen. I think we're getting there. I mean, I think the corporations are gone, right? I think cable news is a dying business. It's getting a smaller and smaller slice. And yes, maybe they'll continue to make some money from cable retransmission, but we're already seeing it. Look at this, the Young Turks. The opportunity that people have now to do television shows, to do broadcast shows that are just as compelling and thoughtful as cable news used to be. But now you can do them over laptops and home studios. The cost of entry, particularly online, is so much less. It's just a matter of time, I think, before the audience begins to shift and say, wait a second, I can get great pieces from Rebel HQ. I don't need to go to MSNBC or Nightly News. I can get really thoughtful analysis and commentary from the Young Turks. I don't need to go to Rachel Maddow on cable. People are realizing that, and you're seeing this huge shift in terms of younger news consumers, where they get their news and information, and that's where digital online platforms like this one win.
Yeah, I'll do the usual Cenk grandiose statement. So buckle up. JR, we're gonna beat them into submission. And it's building off of what David said. So they're used to a system where everybody was trapped. You had a little box in your living room, and you had no other options. So you had to watch TV and eventually cable. Well, now we have 1,000 options. So people under the age of 45 aren't watching them at all. And so when we do compelling programming, well, now they're having trouble keeping up with us. And so, and we do it in a way that is honest and authentic. And then I'll see like big corporations coming in, or startups that are run by guys who used to be at big corporations, and they'll try to fake authenticity. Oh, we're progressives too, man. We do heroin and are with prostitutes. I'm like, what? No.
What show is this? What show is this? I gotta go find it.
Right.
Man, finally knew.
They're so hilariously fake. And then, or yeah, oh no, we're progressive too. Like, we care about the easiest one is the environment. We care about the environment. That's why this show is brought to you by Lockheed Martin. If you say so, right? And so there's now, cable was their biggest advantage. Now they're stuck on cable. And they, because of contractual reasons, they cannot put their main programming online. So by the time they get their shoes on, the race is going to be over. And right now, if you look at it, you'll say, oh, Cenk's crazy. TYT's doing great online and it's big on the social media and stuff. But really, you're going to beat CNN overall? Yeah, I am. We are. You are. Okay. It's because structurally they used to have a massive advantage. Now structurally they're screwed. And by the time they figure out that they need to go to authentic hosts instead of Wolf Blitzer, that'll take them a decade. The race will be long over, and we'll already have won.
Unpopular take. I like Wolf Blitzer. He gets a lot of trouble, but I like him as a person.
Nice guy. He is a nice guy. I give you that. He's a nice guy.
Yeah. And guys, it's never personal, and I feel bad when I make fun of Wolf Blitzer. I do. I've met him super tangentially once or twice. He seems perfectly nice. I even made JR. You remember the old days?
Oh yeah, no. I tell the story more than you know, Cenk. I tell the story more than you know. It's only a 7-second story, and I always tell people.
I can't resist saying it because it's so funny, but I feel bad every time. When Wolf Blitzer was on Celebrity Jeopardy, and they're like, "Okay, words that have 3 E's," and he's like, "car." You're like, wait. What? No, what? He didn't say car, to be fair, but he said a word that did not have anywhere near 3 E's. So, but that doesn't mean he's a bad person. They're all cast to play a role, and honestly, they don't even know that they're being cast to play a role. And to be fair to them, to the anchors, David and I got cast to play a role, and we didn't know either. Yep. And it turns out we broke the cast. And they're like, oh no, we meant to hire someone that was gonna do something else. And that's why we were shown the door in a sense, right? And that's how it works. All right, we gotta go. But David, I'm glad you shared that story because I think it's super interesting.
Thank you.
And all right, guys, love you. We need you to have an excellent weekend. We need you to check out David on Rebel HQ. We need you to check out JR and Damage Report and every other thing on this network. But most of all, we need you to have a happy and glorious weekend. And the way to start that off, obviously, is by going to a room that we all have in common. On Twitch tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern, twitch.tv/TYT. Brett Ehrlich is gonna lead a great edition of Common Room, including with the co-creator of The Daily Show, okay? So everybody check it out. All right, love you. We'll see you Monday.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.